So welcome everyone. My name is Katie Andrews and I am joined today by Joe Perry. We are the climate change coordinators at the Highland Council. We are delighted so many people have signed up for our two-day conference. The conference is a great opportunity to bring people together from across and beyond Highland to discuss the climate and ecological emergency. With some fantastic speakers, we will explore topics relating to energy, land and sea, net zero, and resilient communities. With COP26 being held in Glasgow in less than 2 weeks, this is set to be the most impactful and important Highland Climate Change Conference. Day one will explore the emerging technologies which will help our energy industry reach net zero in Highland. Then by mid-morning, we'll take a closer look at how our lands and seas can help tackle the climate and ecological emergency. Before we begin, we would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has contributed to this conference. It is an absolute honour to share so many voices with you all today, and thank you to everyone who has helped pull this together. A special thanks to our corporate communications team and graphics design team, specifically Duncan McKenzie and Kirsty Foster. We could not have pulled this together without you. Well, let's get started. First off, we have an introduction from Councillor Margaret Davidson, leader of the Highland Council, who will welcome you to day one of the Highland Climate Change Conference.
Poof. Sorry, Marlene, that and ask ourselves that COVID-19. My name's Margaret Davidson. I'm the leader of Highland Council and I'm honoured to be opening day one of this timely two-day online conference. In 2021 in Highland, we are continuing to adjust to the challenges that COVID-19 have brought to our lives. For many of us, this has meant adapting to homeschooling, home working, staycations, and the occasional PCR and lateral flow tests. COVID has also, however, given us the opportunity to reassess business as usual and ask ourselves whether a return to normal is the best way forward. Some of the changes we've made, such as temporary cycle lanes, switching to home working, may well be here to stay in some form or another and have a positive impact on both our health and the environment. But there are bigger challenges facing all of us, and that is, of course, the climate and ecological emergency. It's now 2 years since Highland Council declared a climate and ecological emergency in recognition of the urgent need to reduce our emissions and to protect our ecosystems. In 2021, the threat of climate change has made itself more apparent than ever before. All of us can think of things which we are seeing changing. For me, this has been a summer with scarcely a house martin or swallow in sight. Where are the curlews? And I was watching a flock of starlings last night and it was approximately 10% the size it used to be. What's happening around us? And that's me just observing the bird population in my own community. But on a bigger scale, in these first 10 months of 2021, we have witnessed some of the most extreme climate events in our lifetime. Late June, Western Canada was caught under a heat dome, breaking its record high temperature several times. The final peak temperature reached an unbelievable 49.6 degrees Celsius. Worryingly, the previous record was set in 1937 and was 45 degrees Celsius. It is not normal for heat records to be broken by almost 5 degrees Celsius in one go, but then we are not living in normal times. In mid-July, the world watched in horror as Western Europe was devastated by extreme floods, which left 209 people dead in Germany and Belgium. In some areas, that was the equivalent of 2 months of rainfall in just 2 days. It was impossible to ignore the wildfires that spread across Canada and California this year, burning 2.5 million acres of land, destroying 3,500 structures and threatening the supply of drinking water. You may have seen on the news the firefighters that were resorting to wrapping the giant sequoia tree, especially General Sherman, the largest tree in the world, to protect them from those uncontrollable wildfires. But we're not immune from disasters here in Scotland. In August, the reservoirs in Highland hit 18 years low. It has been a dry year. While wildfires raged across Caithness and Sutherland again, and flooding hit multiple areas of Scotland in July. These disasters are unequivocally related to man-made climate change. The latest IPCC report stated without question that humans have currently caused 1 degree of warming above pre-industrial levels. This figure is likely to reach 1.5 degrees between 2030 and 2052, and this warming is being caused by our emissions. It is our activity on Earth that is causing global warming and making climate disasters more frequent and more severe. So COP26 will bring the global debate to our doors. It will be in Glasgow in November and could be the catalyst for a more sustainable path forward for the world. It is an opportunity for a great awakening of those yet to be convinced of the real and present danger of climate change and the severity of the climate changes we face. We cannot afford another false dawn. Here in Highland, we are committed to being part of the solution by reducing our emissions, working with partners to protect natural spaces across Highland, and adapting to the unavoidable consequences of climate change that have been locked in by our historic emissions ever since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Keep this focus closer to home, and we'll think it's fair to say that there is no viable route to net zero for Scotland without an enormous contribution from Highland. We are vital to reducing Scotland's carbon footprint. While we've many things to be proud of as a reason, there are many areas for improvement. On the plus side, we boast the greatest peatlands in Western Europe, the Flow Country, currently under consideration for World Heritage status, which is great. But they are damaged repeatedly by wildfires. We are the renewable energy powerhouse for the whole of the UK, and in the Cromarty Firth will soon be home to a very exciting green hydrogen hub. And on the banks of the River Ness, we're installing a 93 kilowatt hydro scheme, which will be opened in spring 2022. On the downside, we have higher levels of fuel poverty than almost anywhere else in the country, and this is likely to be exacerbated this winter by rising fuel costs. We also have many residential and commercial properties that are extremely poorly insulated, which is costly both to residents of these homes and to the environment. It is important to say, though, that as a region we're moving in the right direction. Let's not be too downcast. We have to keep our energy positive and moving forward. In September, we presented to the Council the Future Highlands strategy, and it was discussed, and we will be taking a partnership approach to capitalising on the opportunities and natural assets that we have available, relating to green energy, to tourism, to our workforce, innovation, science and skills. We can derive value from waste. We can attract green businesses. We can transition to a green fleet, the HGVs powered by hydrogen. We continue to produce sustainable energy, and we can provide energy efficient homes. This will take time. This will take finance. This will take commitment. We need to bring all of those to the table here in Highland and continue to make progress. This conference will feature walks and talks and workshops on all of these topics and much more. You'll hear from blue carbon experts, green carbon experts, community organisers, MSPs, school pupils, land managers, business owners, activists, and many other passionate and hardworking individuals from the Highlands and beyond. All share the same ambition, delivering a more sustainable future for a healthier planet. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this two-day conference. Your participation and passion make more ambitious action on climate change possible. I hope you find this event interesting and inspiring, and I encourage you to make your voice heard in the workshops. This is your conference after all. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson, for that inspiring message. We now have a message from Drew Hendry, MP for Inverness, Badenoch and Strathspey and Nairn.
It is vital that wherever we are, even in areas such as the Highlands, that we are all thinking about, talking about, and most importantly, acting on issues around climate change. Whether it's recycling even more by taking a critical eye over what we waste and thinking about how we can consume less, to looking to more active travel options, such as maybe using the stunning new Inverness electric bike scheme. Little changes in our lives can make a lot of difference collectively, but we can also do the bigger things too, like demanding more renewable energy. Across the Highlands, we have an abundance of both on and offshore wind opportunities, huge hydropower potential, and newly accessible wave and tidal resources. We even have, believe it or not, a lot of sun for solar power if we choose to harness it. We're planting millions of trees, but everything must be ramped up now as we speed up our just transition from our over-dependence on oil and gas. With your input, those elected, like me, indeed politicians of all parties and none, can demand that more is done. COP26 is almost here, so in finishing, I'd say enjoy the conference, think, talk, but most importantly, let's act.
Thank you, Drew, for another inspiring message, and thank you again to Councillor Davidson for those introductions. This really is the time to act, and on that note, let's move to our first session, which is all about energy. This session will explore the emerging technologies which will help our energy industry reach net zero in Highland and beyond. Attendees will hear about developments of green hydrogen in Highlands. They will hear from experts in SSE Renewables and all about energy efficient school initiatives which are ongoing in Highland, and many more. First off, we have Martin McDonald, Project and Fund Manager, speaking about the Riverness Hydro.
Firstly, thanks for taking the time to tune into this presentation on the Riverness Hydro project. I'm Martin McDonald, a Project and Fund Manager in Highland Council's Transformation team, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of a project the team and I are really proud of. I'd also like to add that whilst I'm delivering the presentation, colleagues in our property team and climate change and energy team have been instrumental in the development and ongoing delivery of this scheme. I wanted to start off by giving a brief overview of the scheme and some of the headline stats. Situated on the banks of the River Ness, directly adjacent to the Westlink Bridge, this Archimedes Screw project will generate and supply over 500,000 kilowatt hours of green electricity annually to the nearby Inverness Leisure Centre, one of the highest consuming buildings across our estate. This will offset the organisation's reliance on grid supplied electricity and also help reduce the council's carbon footprint. We are utilising historical infrastructure from a disused hydro scheme and a technology that dates back to ancient Egypt to help address a very current problem. This intervention is a long-term investment for the organisation, and the asset itself will last well over 50 years. In addition, the site itself will act as a hub for STEM learning. The innovative structure and supporting interactive content will ensure the scheme is a welcome addition to a high footfall area of the city, further strengthening the river as an attraction and reintroducing it as a valued asset for renewable generation. Recently, there's been a lot of comms on the scheme, especially on the Carbon Clever Twitter account, so this presentation is going to provide some context and background on the development of the project itself. I'll warn you in advance that I'm going to talk about partnership working a lot today, so please bear with me. Now, this isn't the first iteration of this project. A previous business case was developed, but it was deemed lacking. Some of the figures were speculative and overly optimistic. It failed to properly consider risks, and it didn't capture people's imagination. It was functional, but one-dimensional and missing any real soul. To compound this, it lacked specialist input, and the council were doing too much of the heavy lifting, exposing the project to serious risk. The proposal always had potential, but it lacked any structure. Simplistically, it missed a lot of the important but boring stuff. It ended up with the transformation team and myself for review and became part of my portfolio. I'm really proud of the fact that we didn't panic and abandon the project. We stripped the proposal back to its shell and started again, involving the right people early on to take what could have been a speculative venture and turn it into something we feel will help transform the river. Building on my last slide, I can't overstate the importance of getting the right people involved, working as a cross-organisational team comprised of a multitude of skill sets and expertise. Now, we stripped the proposal right back to its most basic form, modernising old hydro infrastructure to provide the electricity to our assets. It soon became clear that people wanted more than just a functional scheme in a wind structure. They exist all over the region, albeit many of them on private land with limited access. So this presented an opportunity to do so much more, to educate and to inspire. And from this point, it all fell into place. A bold and ambitious idea needed a bold and ambitious structure. That also needed strong supporting materials and required partnership support. I also have to mention the council's member-led commercial board. We would never have managed to get the business case approved, let alone get to this stage without their unwavering support. That's where trust dividend comes in. Councillors trusted officers and believed in the vision and gave autonomy to work through a process and spend time working a proposal without unfair pressure. This was all based on honest, frank, two-way dialogue. Ensuring the fundamentals were covered, underpinned by market and business intelligence, gave certainty that we had a robust financial proposal that we were confident would work. It would be remiss of me to talk about this project without mentioning our funding partner, Salix Finance Limited. Salix was established by UK government and began working in partnership with Scottish government in 2006 to provide interest-free loans to the public sector for energy efficiency projects. The Recycling Fund aims to increase long-term investment in energy-efficient technologies across the public sector by enabling clients to reinvest savings from previous projects to finance further energy reduction schemes. The loan fund is ring-fenced for investment in projects that will reduce the council's energy spend and carbon emissions. Highland Council currently operate the largest recycling fund in Scotland and the largest for a local authority in the entire UK. The fund has directly contributed over £1 million to this project. Moving on to the exciting part, the design and structure itself. Quite often you see highly visual and impactful initial designs, and these features are more often than not value engineered out. By having an agreed vision, clear project drivers, the right people involved, and numbers that stack up, it gave us the support mechanisms, expertise, and confidence to resist taking the easy option and prevent the complex stuff like physics and structural engineering from compromising and downgrading the visual impact of the structure. The first image you see there is an illustration from local artist Claire McLean. This was the catalyst for what we have today. This is a design and build project. Essentially, that means we provide the contractor with a concept, key performance indicators, and they do the hard bit and figure out the nuts and bolts of it all, with oversight from our construction manager, Alan Henderson. This requires trust and is vitally important that we get the right contractor with the right experience. The principal contractor, Bradley, in conjunction with their sister company, Hydro NI, and Spans Babcock, who are supplying and installing the turbines, have been involved in over 70 Archimedes screw turbine installs in the UK alone, with an installed capacity of over 5,500 kilowatts. Not a single one of these schemes has failed to meet its predicted output. Again, with work on site, this is a collective effort. From Leslie Hatt Architecture providing technical and contractual support to Hanson's Limited Solutions, designing and manufacturing the ultra-modern envelope, This is a lot to manage, but ensuring we get the right contractors with a proven track record who really understand what we're trying to achieve has meant we've managed to overcome on-site challenges, and I think the selection of site images perfectly sums up the impressive pace of delivery. I'd be lying if I said it's all been plain sailing. Working in a water environment is complicated and costly, that's undeniable, and this project was already complex enough with challenging delivery timelines. This was all before the pandemic. Along with the vast majority of construction works, our project was delayed by over 12 months. This created uncertainty and had a domino effect. The delays jeopardised the feed-in tariff, a government incentive for renewables. To put that in context, the feed-in tariff income is worth £51,000 in year one alone, rising 3% annually for a period of 20 years. This is significant money and vitally important to the project. The delays also meant we experienced a shortage in materials. At one point, even sourcing cement seemed impossible. The delays also impacted the river working period, as determined by SEPA. This means we can only work in the river from July until mid-October to ensure there's no negative impact on the natural habitat. With such a short window, delays are always a concern, but thanks to the experience of those involved, we've managed to overcome these obstacles so far. Touch wood. The interactive content development is another great example of partnership working and strength in numbers. De-risking a project and sharing the load because we all want to achieve the same thing. Anyone who knows me or who's worked with me previously will know that communication is not my strong point. This was a pinch point for the project, and we were lucky enough to get Katie Andrews, Climate Change Coordinator in the Climate Change and Energy team involved, and she really took this by the scruff of the neck and made it into something. Equally, we couldn't have got to this stage on our own. Putting the hard yards in early is setting out a clear vision for the scheme, not the detail, but the ambition and the aspiration, alongside working with like-minded, organisation-driven individuals, has really paid off. Unfortunately, I can't go into detail about each partner and the support they've provided. It would take me hours, and I'm quite sure you're all ready for a break after listening to my monotonous voice for the last 15 minutes. However, one great example is Science Skills Academy, who have launched a naming competition across the region, giving pupils the opportunity to design a poster and submit a name for the scheme. Don't worry, as partner group, we'll shortlist these submissions to avoid a voting McVoteface incident. The winner will get a load of goodies, but HLH have also agreed to provide some complimentary classes for the winning class. Building on this, SSE have then revised their renewables module to incorporate this scheme, so moving forward students will have the chance to learn about a really innovative scheme that's fully accessible to them. These are things we as a council project team could not have done on our own, and we are really appreciative of the time and effort our colleagues have put in, particularly SSE, HLH and Visit Loch Ness. This is an overview of the different interactive content themes we've developed with partners. This is a vitally important work stream as it will serve to strengthen the visitor experience, but also help attract and cater for different types of visitor. It's hugely important that the scheme and messaging is inclusive and doesn't just cater for one type of visitor. We also want to ensure the surrounding environment and landscaping provide an area for people to spend time and enjoy. The interactive content will be presented in a mixture of interpretive boards and also QR codes, giving visitors a personal viewing experience through BYOD, bring your own device. We are also committed to ensuring the content is refreshed over time to reflect the changing aspirations of the partner organisations, but also to help articulate the key climate challenges facing the region and hopefully inspiring some action. I fully appreciate, particularly for those in the audience who haven't heard about this project before, that this is a lot of information to take in. So I want to pause briefly to give you an opportunity to reflect on the project renders and key benefits. We will have the scheme fully commissioned by March 2021, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Martin, for that comprehensive presentation. This really will be a transformational project for the Highlands. And as Martin said, I have the privilege of working with him on this project and with the key partners to develop the unique visitor experience at the site. We will now turn to Paula Malone, who is Energy Sparks Project and Volunteer Coordinator and Education Support. Paula will explain how Energy Sparks is helping schools in Highland improve their energy efficiency?
I'd like to introduce you today to Energised, an online energy analysis and education tool that's working with schools to reduce carbon and empower pupils to take action on climate change. This started as a pilot in 2017 with 11 schools in the Bath and North East Somerset area. Since then, and with funding from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy and from the OVO Foundation, we have spread to over 150 schools all across the UK. We've been working with 13 schools in the Highlands since 2019 and are planning for 65 more Scottish schools to join the programme in the coming months. Energised offers a holistic package that looks at tackling climate change in schools by supporting them to reduce energy-based emissions and educating and empowering pupils to take the lead on this. By 2023, we're aiming to have supported 350 UK schools to save £1.9 million in energy costs and to have avoided the emissions of 6,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide. We're currently free for state and maintained schools, and our data and activities are available even to schools that haven't signed up with us. Let me tell you about why Energised is an invaluable tool for schools and a little bit about how it works. As a pupil-focused energy management platform, we aim to increase energy literacy among pupils. So one of the first things pupils see when they log into the platform is some comparisons, putting their school's energy consumption into context. Even as an adult, it can be complicated trying to understand exactly what a kilowatt hour can mean in real-life terms. For pupils, we compare that to how many kettles the same amount of electricity would boil, or how far a petrol car would have to drive to emit the same amount of carbon. One of the most powerful illustrations on the pupil dashboard really hits home the difference that renewables can make. We can understand the amount of carbon that's emitted by a school's electricity or gas use in terms of how many years it would take for trees to remove those greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And then we can contrast that with the amount of time it would take for non-carbon emitting renewables to produce the same amount of energy. Yes, that's right. In this example, it would take 13 trees 40 years to absorb the carbon dioxide emitted by 1 year of electricity consumption by this school. However, the same amount of electricity would have been generated carbon-free in only 3 weeks by an onshore wind turbine. This sort of comparison can really help pupils and staff to understand the impact that their school's energy use can have on the planet. Schools that have solar panels can also see what their renewable input looks like in real-world terms. For example, in 1 week, Aviemore Primary's solar panels generated enough electricity to play 13 months of non-stop video games. Pupil action is at the heart of what we do, and we have a range of activities that enable that to happen. Our activities are categorised according to the skills they develop: analyst, change maker, communicator, and detective. You don't have to be an Energised school to use our activities. However, if you are, many of our analyst activities will incorporate your school's data. These will take your pupils and staff through the data charts, prompting them to answer questions that will build their analytical understanding of their school's energy consumption. Some of our activities are designed for specific age groups or school stages, but our colour-coded presentation of the data makes it easy for even the youngest pupils to gain an understanding of what's happening with their school's energy use. We receive a school's energy consumption data directly from the supplier within a couple of days of use. What this means is that pupils can take action on electricity or gas use within school 1 week and then see the impact their actions have made the following week. There's no better way to empower pupils than showing them that their actions are making a difference. While our analyst activities focus on the data, our detective activities support pupils to investigate what's happening in real life. These might involve carrying out spot checks to see where lights and equipment are being left on, or if pupils are wearing warm clothing, or delving a little deeper to run energy audits, investigate temperatures, or even monitor individual appliances. Analyst and detective activities help build pupils' understanding of energy use in and around your school. However, our changemaker activities are the ones that will make a difference to your energy consumption and ultimately your carbon emissions. Pupils are supported to carry out behavioural change actions and campaigns in their schools that bring energy efficiency to the fore and involve everyone in the school switching off. Communicator activities provide ideas for how pupils can spread the energy-saving message to their school peers, staff and wider communities with posters, assemblies, reports and displays. but they can also enable pupils to engage with the staff members in school who can really make a difference with energy efficiency. I've already mentioned how seeing the real-world impact of their actions can really empower pupils. Almost 2/3 of young people surveyed for a recently published academic report stated that they're very worried about climate change. Taking part in Energy Sparks activities can help alleviate some of the climate anxiety that many young people are feeling, in addition to developing valuable life skills such as collaboration, leadership, communication, and project management. Among our resources, we also offer Explorer activities, which focus more on educating pupils about climate change, carbon emissions, and energy issues, including the energy solutions that already exist. These can be used as part of the curriculum by teachers and are fully resourced with curriculum links and extension ideas. To make it easy for schools to get started with Energy Sparks, we've created the Get Energised programme, which takes pupils from setting up an energy team to analysing data about school building use, investigating poor energy behaviour in school, supporting others to take responsibility for energy conservation, reassessing the data, and then communicating what they've accomplished. Obviously, not all energy efficiency measures applicable to schools are within pupil power. We've also put together a range of activities and interventions that school management can focus on. These include providing advice and exemplars for writing school policies and incorporating discussion about energy and climate in meetings, and also provides a menu, as it were, for site managers of interventions that could be actioned that would reduce energy consumption and costs, such as changing thermostat timings, changing lights to LEDs, and even adding solar panels. Energy Sparks schools can even see the potential savings and costs that these interventions would have. One of the tools Energy Sparks provides to schools is the function to set a specific target for their energy reduction, then being able to track monthly and ongoing progress towards that target. We'll suggest ways to reduce consumption via the dashboard, weekly alerts and reminders. We'll also suggest activities for pupils to help engage the whole school and provide more insight through our detailed analysis of the school's energy use. One of the first schools to do this, Ullapool High School, for example, set a target of 3% and already achieved their target in the first few weeks of term. We provide a complete analysis of schools' energy consumption according to different criteria, as well as providing access to our energy analyst who offers online audits with school staff and pupils. For a lot of schools, understandably, finances are a priority. If this is the case for your school, our website features several case studies showing how Energy Sparks has saved school thousands of pounds through simple yet effective measures. One example is how we supported Whiteways Primary School to save 35% of their annual gas costs through the no-cost action of changing the timing settings on their boiler controls. Another example is that of Freshford, who were saved £2,600 when automatic Energy Sparks alerts alerted users that there was a problem with the heating system. We also provide helpful comparisons for schools to compare their energy consumption with schools in similar geographical or other situations so that they can develop an understanding of what an energy efficient school looks like. This is a feature which is particularly helpful for local authorities and multi-academy trusts. You can find us online at energysparks.uk, where you can see the range of activities and support we offer to schools in the Highlands and across the UK. Here you'll also find our case studies, newsletters and details of free training sessions. Please do get in touch with us at hello@energysparks.uk if you have any questions.
Brilliant, thanks Paula. It is great to hear how schools are getting involved in climate action and how our own schools in Highlands are improving their energy efficiency. Energy Sparks is a brilliant toolkit and we have recently relaunched it within our schools with the Get Energised campaign, which Paula alluded to in that presentation. If you would like to sign your school up, please contact Carbon Clever at highland.gov.uk. So now changing the focus slightly by hearing from Joanne Alday, Senior Executive at the Port of Cromarty Firth. She will be discussing the exciting developments of hydrogen in Highland.
Hello, I'm Joanne Alday. I'm the Strategic Business Development Manager for Port of Cromarty Firth, and I've been asked to speak to you this year's Highland Climate Change Conference to tell you about some of the exciting developments that are taking place right on our doorstep in both offshore wind and green hydrogen. So let me begin. The first thing to say is that there's probably no better place in Scotland to be based just now if you're interested in renewable energy, in climate change, in the transition to net zero. We are on the cusp of a renewable energy boom in our region, and that's being driven in particular by the offshore wind sites that will be built off our shores. You can see from the two maps here, one of them is the ScotWind leasing rounds that will be awarded in January, and the other is a recent round that has been announced for electrifying the oil and gas industry using offshore wind. They're expected to announce about 12 gigawatts of new offshore wind projects between them, which is up from about 1 gigawatt of installed capacity at the moment. So you can see we're going to have a step change in the size and scale of these projects, and particularly the number of these projects over the coming decades. And we're in the best place, we're at the right time, we've got the best facilities within the Cromarty Firth that have been tried and tested for supporting these projects already. We have a better track record than anybody else in the country to be able to support these projects, and we're geographically well placed to make sure that they happen within our region. So as I said at the start, it's a really exciting time to be in the Highlands and in the Moray Firth just now. What we're trying to do to capitalise on all of these opportunities is to create a strategic offshore wind hub for Scotland within the Cromarty Firth region and within the Inner Moray Firth. We're looking at a number of projects, and I'll touch on some of them as we talk through the presentation. The first couple to mention are the advanced manufacturing plant, which is planned for Nig Energy Park. This would be new manufacturing to the UK and producing steel tower sections and other steel components that currently would be made abroad and then imported into the country. We hope that's going to change, and they're actually going to be made in this country in the future, and we hope that we'll be able to make some announcements on that in the coming months. We are also in a number of discussions around building a manufacturing facility, or perhaps even a number of manufacturing facilities in the region for floating offshore wind, which will be the future development of the sector will include a lot more floating wind than the fixed bottom wind that we've seen to date. And I'll mention the hydrogen project and the powerhouse in more detail in a moment. We're also continuing to support onshore wind projects and help them build out and expand the amount of onshore wind that we have, and that can also produce our green electricity. The North of Scotland Hydrogen Programme, you can see here the master plan for that programme. The concept is that we will be taking onshore and offshore wind, so green electricity, bringing that to an onshore electrolysis facility where water then would be split using that electricity into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen then can be used as power for heat, for transport, for clean fuels, and you can see here some of the industries that are hoping to use that green hydrogen in the future. We hope as well that we'll have a major export opportunity, particularly to Northern Europe, where the countries don't have the space or the wind resource to generate enough renewable electricity on their own. So we think this is quite an exciting prospect for the region in the future. We have been working with a number of partners on the distilleries project, which is our major project within the hydrogen hub. And this is a feasibility study for a large-scale 35 megawatt electrolysis facility. That would be the largest in the UK, and it would be in production, all being well, by 2024. The project has now moved beyond feasibility. We're now into a concept select, and then we'll move into an engineering and design phase, hopefully with the final investment decision taken next year, so 2022. The partners in that project who are leading it are Scottish Power and Pale Blue Dot. We've also been working very closely with Glenmorangie, White and Mackay and Diageo, all of whom supported that initial feasibility study phase. They're likely to be some of the early customers for that green hydrogen to help them fully decarbonise their facilities and their distilleries. We are also working on a number of other projects, and you can see some of them here, around the movement of hydrogen, the export of hydrogen, the use of hydrogen as clean fuels, so we can hopefully make clean fuels available to maritime vessels through the port, as well as to road users through HGVs and possibly for the rail industry as well in the future. So quite a lot of different customers for that hydrogen, and mainly people who can't be using the electricity because it's either too expensive or too difficult to use the electricity for them to decarbonise those operations. So, for example, heavy goods vehicles that would just have to carry too many batteries, and that makes it more expensive. So it's likely they're going to look at fuel cell technology as well, and maybe move to hydrogen. They may do electric as well. It could be a combination, but it's likely that hydrogen could be a preferred option, just because of the space that the electricity and the batteries would take. To accelerate that sector and really get it going as quickly as we can, the port has also signed an agreement with Gen2 Energy in Norway to begin importing their green hydrogen from 2023. So that's a year earlier than we may be able to start producing ourselves. We hope, as I say, that by bringing that in, we can really kickstart the sector. It will help people ensure that there is a secure supply. We can make sure then that they are switching their infrastructure earlier. We can learn obviously from what they're doing in Norway because they're slightly ahead of us. And then once our own production is up and running, we can switch to that domestic production, and that can be available to customers across the UK, all being well. So quite exciting times in hydrogen, between refuelling infrastructures, clean fuels for the maritime industry, distilleries, and quite exciting projects. We're also fully aligned with the Highland Council and their exciting ambitions for a Highland hydrogen economy. And that includes working alongside Hightrans, the Highlands and Islands Transport Partnership, and their plans to help support the rail and the public transport sectors to decarbonise as well. The Powerhouse project is a slightly different angle. This is more research and development and skills based, and we're hoping the Powerhouse will become a global centre of excellence in floating offshore wind and green hydrogen technologies. Scotland is likely to be the first country in the world to start building these projects at commercial scale, so quite large scale projects. So we do have a genuine opportunity to be a world leader in some of these technologies, and we want to make sure that we grab that opportunity and make the most of it. So we have developed a Powerhouse project, a centre that is hosted by the University of the Highlands and Islands in Alness. We have a full-time manager whose post is currently funded by the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland, and we're working with partners across industry and also the university and academic sector and the hydrogen sector and the offshore wind sector to really bring all of those different parties together and make sure that we're delivering new products, new technologies that will help accelerate the sectors, and also making sure that people have the right skills to be able to take jobs in these sectors as they expand. Back to Opportunity Committee Firth. This is a consortium of 14 organisations across the academic, public and private sectors, and it includes 4 port facilities who are all working together. And we've been working together now for about a year. And the reason that all of these people have come together is because of the size and scale of this opportunity for the Highlands. we all want to make sure that we grab as much of it as we can and we really make the most of this opportunity, because these things don't come along every 5 minutes. We believe that by working together, we can make more of it than if we all worked on our own and perhaps in isolation. So what Opportunity Cromarty Firth can deliver for the region includes things like this 50 to 70 year pipeline of jobs and business opportunities. We want to increase the amount of UK and Scottish content in the offshore wind and green hydrogen sectors, so really set them up to be making the most of any products and services that are available in Scotland and particularly in the Highlands. We want to make sure that local people have the skills to be able to take advantage of this jobs boom that is likely to happen in the region. And the great thing is, it's not going to happen tomorrow, it's going to happen in a few years' time. So we have time to prepare, we have time to learn, we have time to build the skills to make sure that we're ready for when these jobs are coming through in larger numbers. We've also got the chance to develop the technology and expertise that can then be exported to other countries. And I think this is probably one of the most exciting parts of this opportunity, is we can develop the skills and expertise here in the Highlands, but then those skills and that expertise and the products and services that go along with them can then be exported to other countries as they decarbonise. So it's not just part of our net zero journey, it's part of a global net zero journey, and we can be at the heart of that and we can really make a difference as part of that transition and part of that decarbonisation. And the final thing I wanted to share is kind of the icing on the cake. We are working together to bid for Freeport status. And what that means, it delivers certain business benefits to people setting up in a Freeport. So if they're creating jobs, if they're creating activity, if they're going to be putting money into the local supply chain, then there are government incentives available to allow people to do that through Freeports. And we believe it's a unique opportunity to really build on the projects that are going to be coming through our region and make sure that we have manufacturing capabilities and that we increase that Scottish content within all of those projects and really deliver transformational change to both the Highlands and to Scotland. And we believe the Freeport mechanism is a really great way to do that and attract that international inward investment and advanced manufacturing, skilled jobs, exciting careers, and really make sure that people that are in this area have got all of that that they can look forward to over the coming decades. So I genuinely hope that's given you a flavour of the exciting times that we can look forward to over the next 50 years in the Highlands. I appreciate it's a very long time scale, but it is a very big opportunity, and I sincerely hope that you're as excited as we are. I hope that you get involved and that you get on board. Please do have a look at the Opportunity Cromarty Firth website if you're interested in more. There's links to skills training, there's links to the different projects. We'd love to hear your feedback, and I sincerely hope that you are as excited to get involved as we are. Thank you very much.
Yes, Joanne, we're definitely very excited about the opportunities that are rising in the local area. And thank you so much for that really exciting presentation. It's great to hear about the alternative technologies and energy sources being developed in Highland. And it's really exciting to see the master plan for north of Scotland hydrogen and see all the industries which will benefit from this hub. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all attendees, if you have any questions from these sessions, please attend our workshops for the energy session. This is at 1:45 to 3:15, and you can find the links to these workshops on the council website. and we really want as many people to get involved in these workshops as possible and make your voice heard. So we will now hear from Rachel Anderson, who is the Sustainability Officer at the Highland Council, who will speak a little bit about the EV infrastructure in Highland.
Hi, I'm Rachel and I'm part of the EV infrastructure team within the Climate Change and Energy Department at the Highland Council. Our aim is to help combat the significant carbon emissions associated with the transport sector in the region, and this follows on from Scottish Government targets to phase out the need for new petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2030. Over the last year, we've seen an improvement in encouraging behaviours and attitudes towards the use of electric vehicles and have had continued support from councillors and communities. Over the last 6 months, our EV team has expanded from 2 people to 5, which allows us to work on various different programmes and projects to help to develop this network. The Highland Council's charge point network increased usage by 19% from 2019 to 2020, and this only shows the demand that we're facing going into 2022. We do now have over 70 charge points, and this is set to increase due to the different programmes that we work on. Since the end of July, we have identified that we've saved 47 tonnes of carbon, which is equivalent to 279 trees, and this is based upon the usage of our EV charge points within the estate. Whilst this is a rewarding sector to work in, it does come with its challenges, and this is mainly due to the area that we stay in. The Highlands is one of the largest regions to cover in comparison to any other local authorities, especially when installing the EV infrastructure. We have a challenging landscape, there's grid constraints, and there's land ownership difficulties, which means that it can pose a difficulty when installing the EV charge points, but it also means that we're in a developing sector. There's lots of innovation and support to install and improve this network. The Local Authority Installation Programme is a programme which continues to install EV infrastructure across the Highlands, and we're always looking for opportunities and site suggestions from any of the communities or anyone visiting the area. The Low Carbon Transport and Travel is a revised project in partnership with Hightrans and NHS Highlands. This is looking to install 18 charge points in Inverness in total, and will also have an e-bike hire scheme within the city, which will accumulate to 30 e-bikes for hire in total. One of my colleagues has also recently begun work on the fleet decarbonisation within the Highland Council, and this will be installing charge points at various depots completing in March 2022. This will also encourage many of our colleagues to decarbonise their travel wherever they're going to. In June, we introduced a tariff to all of our EV charge points, and this was to cover the electricity, maintenance and repairs required on the charge points. This has been an overall positive change for both users and the council. In the coming year, we're looking to continue to install the EV charge points within the Local Authority Installation Programme, the Low Carbon Transport and Travel, and the fleets. We continue to look for collaboration and opportunities, and we continue to scope any site suggestions that come into us. To meet future demand, it should be mentioned that Highland Council is not the sole provider of the electric vehicle charge points within the Highlands. This is why we look for collaboration and opportunities, but the EV charging provision is expected to evolve into a combination of home, workplace, public and private network infrastructure. Technology operating models and configurations are developing, and the profile of how EV users choose to charge their cars will change over time. Thanks for listening, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thanks, Rachel. Again, it is really exciting to hear all about our EV network in Highland, the challenges and opportunities that are coming away from this very important issue, especially with the rapid increase of EV vehicles on the roads, and as Rachel mentioned, the recent national targets for the need of petrol and diesel cars by 2030. We'll now hear from Lochaber Environmental Group, changing the theme a little bit here, about how people should invest in Lochaber Community Hydro.
Lochaber is a beautiful place. I'm proud to call this place home. We're here in Glennahoolish, where we want to build a hydro scheme, Lochaber Community Hydro Scheme. My name is Marian Austin and I'm the chair of Lochaber Environmental Group, known as LEG. Glennahoolish is a great site for a hydro scheme. It could generate enough electricity for approximately 400 homes. We've chosen this site because environmental impact will be minimal. We're using the same access roads as the commercial forestry uses, and they're already in place. The pipeline replaces an old water supply pipeline. Lochaber Environmental Group has been delivering sustainable projects in Lochaber for over 20 years. For example, energy efficiency, sustainable travel, composting, and growing our own food locally. We need help to build this hydro scheme. We're looking for people to invest in the community benefit company, Leg Power, by buying community shares. You'll have a real opportunity to be part of something that's great for the area and for the environment. And on the side, you should get interest on your money.
My name's Jamie McIntyre. I'm a director of Sunak Community Renewables that built our community hydro scheme. In something under 5 years of operation, we've donated well over £100,000 to the local community. The benefit of the community actually owning a project like this is that it means all of the profit gets returned for local development.
We think the future is electric. We need to be able to generate more clean power. We would like you to invest in making good clean power from our Lochaber Community Hydro Scheme by buying community shares.
So thank you very much, Lochaber Community Environmental Group. It's great to hear how communities are taking action and taking things into their own hands and are keen to produce their own energy. As mentioned in the video, it will power over 400 homes and it will use existing infrastructure, so it's not damaging to the landscape. As a regular visitor to Lochaber, it is such a beautiful environment and we want to protect it as much as possible. If you're interested, please do contact Lochaber Environmental Group for more information. So from local to more regional, we will now hear from Andrew Sloan, Head of Constant Strategy at SSE Renewables, who will speak about SSE Renewables and how they are delivering renewables in Highland.
Hi there, my name is Andy Sloan. I'm the Head of Consent Strategy at SSE Renewables, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today at the Highland Climate Change Conference. I work for SSE Renewables, and for those of you who don't know who we are, we're the UK's largest developer of renewable energy. We've been playing a vital role in delivery of renewable energy since 1943 in the Hydro Development Act in the Highland region. We've got a rich heritage of development within Highland. We've got 54 power stations, 78 dams and over 300 kilometres of underground tunnels, providing electricity to Highland communities and transforming the way people live and work. We have a pump storage scheme called FOIRS, which has been in place since 1975. The original power there was started generating in 1896. So there's a rich heritage and history of renewable development in this region, and it's something that continues to this day with our new projects, such as Corrie Glass, which is a pump storage scheme that I'll speak to you about briefly later, and also our ongoing interest in onshore and offshore wind, as well as our existing traditional hydro schemes. So where are we today? Well, SSE believes in bold action required by government and businesses and indeed society in order to battle climate change. We're all in this together. It's a bit of a cliche that's been used a lot, but it is true. I think that is now getting through. For the first time ever, we've seen big organisations really take this on and tackle it in a meaningful way. Not just the pandemic. I mean, I'm coming to you from my room in my house today, which I've been for about 18 months, like most people, working from home. Those have been lucky enough to work their way through this whole pandemic. But now more than ever, we need to focus on the net zero delivery and a green and resilient recovery. And what we do is part and parcel of that. We've been doing it for years. It just happens to be that right now it's really in focus, and I think we have to make the most of that as a country. That's why we're, as I said before, proud to be the principal partner at COP and hope that meaningful change will come as a result of the COP26 in Glasgow later next month. Decarbonisation at its pace and scale is required in order to address the twin challenges of climate crisis and the economic recovery that will be required as a result of this pandemic and the lasting effects, which nobody fully understands yet. But we at SSE Renewables are at the forefront of accelerating the pace of change and taking action right now. There's a lot of people talking about it. You've heard people talking about it probably recently in the press, famously. But we are actually doing something. We're putting the money where our mouth is, investing £7.5 billion in low carbon projects. Construction already underway in some of these projects. A lot of these projects are in Scotland, both onshore and offshore. SSE Renewables is building the largest offshore wind farm in the world at Dogger Bank in the northeast, just off the northeast coast of England. We've got Scotland's largest and deepest offshore wind farm at Seagreen, which construction is underway. And we're unlocking the incredible potential of the wind in the Viking project in the Shetland Islands. As well as this, we're also been extending our Gordon Bush wind farm near Brora, which is our first subsidy-free project, and breaking new ground for us in terms of taking developments through that economic process without having the backbone of a subsidy. So we're very incredibly proud to be involved in these projects. We're very, very eager that people understand that this is something that must continue, and it's just the start. I mean, we're expecting that there'll be targets come out of these conferences, there'll be targets come out of government, and all of them will be saying the same thing. We must continue at pace to decarbonise, particularly as we add in transport and heat. Which, there's some conservative estimates that by 2050 the demand for electricity will double. That, as well as decarbonising our existing generation, which SSE has been heavily involved in, shutting the last of our coal plants in the last few years, is a stretching target. So SSE has aligned itself to UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we are aiming to cut our carbon intensity by 60% by 2030. As well as that, we're looking to treble our renewable output to 30 terawatt hours and to help accommodate up to 10 million new electric vehicles. And doing this while paying fair taxes and a real living wage. So we're looking to align ourselves with the just transition that's required in order to bring everybody on this journey of decarbonisation and meeting net zero. It's a priority for government, it's a priority for major companies such as SSE Renewables. We're the first company to have broken new ground by publishing a just transition plan to help protect workers and communities as we move towards net zero. And this is something that I see will be happening with other companies and other organisations in the years to come. So what does the future look like in terms of moving towards net zero? Well, I've already touched on the fact that we're looking to potentially double the demand for electricity as we move away from other generation forms, which we have been doing for the last 10 years. We will need to find new renewable sources. A lot of that will come from offshore. Some of it will come from tidal, some of it will come from solar, and some of it will come from onshore, as well as existing hydro, pump storage, and other technologies such as hydrogen. which will depend heavily upon renewable generation to power it and fuel it. So what do I see? I see more renewables. We're going to have to look to a world that's different from the way it's been before. I used a slide in a previous presentation about showing one of our coal plants, which has been demolished, and it's at the end of a street in a town. That's no longer the case. Generation is now distributed across the countryside. As you'd be aware, in this region, you do see turbines. I think you're going to see more, and you're going to see larger ones to take advantage of the increased efficiencies of the new technologies. These will have to be sensitively located. However, we are going to have to see them. I think that's no bad thing in terms of acknowledging where our energy use comes from. Efficiencies will have to be made in the way we live our lives and what we do in choices and travel and transport in particular. But I think as we decarbonise heat and transport, we will see increase in demand for more renewable technologies, and we should be taking advantage of that plentiful supply of renewable resources such as the water and the wind that we have in this country. I think it will also necessitate the upgrading of existing grid infrastructure, changes to the way we work. Working from home, a lot of people working from home. I think I can see that continuing for certain industries. I think it'll be a different way of working, which I think it brings benefits to some rural communities. It will mean improved broadband and connections such as that, such new ways of working, new technologies. So I think there'll be a lot of change. I think that from my point of view and SSE Renewables point of view, the repowering of existing wind farms and hydro schemes is something that will continue as we go forward, as the sites that have been up for 10, 15 years now will need to be repowered and extended potentially. I think there'll be some new sites as well, taking advantage of the new technologies. There'll certainly be a lot more offshore, and there'll be hydrogen storage, hydro pump storage. I mentioned before our Corrie Glass scheme. That's a 1,500 megawatt scheme that's been proposed and consented now. It's working its way through the process of getting its economic cases right and its pre-construction process kicked off. So that's a project that will take 6-7 years to construct and will provide the UK's first new pump storage scheme for over 40 years. The 1,500 megawatts in terms of capacity, that's 30 gigawatt hours of storage, which is enough to power 3 million homes for up to 24 hours non-stop over a 5-day period. So I mean, it's a huge battery for the whole of the grid in the United Kingdom, and it will make a massive difference in terms of the penetration of renewable projects onto our grid. So I can see some more of that happening. I can see more turbines. I can see more battery storage. I can see the way we live our lives changing slightly. I can see us moving all electric away from gas. So there's numerous changes coming, but all of these things, substantial change, it needs substantial investment, which leads to jobs and supply chain opportunities, but it also needs substantial vision, drive, direction, policy, and that comes from the top from government. And really that will start next month with what happens at COP and through events like today's event where people get together and discuss the opportunities in a meaningful way. So that I was asked to say what I thought I could see as what the future is going to look like as we move towards net zero. And I think that pretty much sums up in terms of where SSE Renewables are coming from. I think one of the other things I should just touch on finally before we go is the opportunities that can arise of that. I've touched on jobs and investment. As we come out of this COVID period, I'd like to think we're getting towards the end of it now and we move into kind of a kind of new beginnings. There will be opportunities through these types of projects, whether it be new grid infrastructure, whether it be new types of power station, whether it be types of storage, electric cars, all the different things, new industries, and I would hope to see Scotland at the forefront of that. We've certainly got the opportunity, we've certainly got the expertise. It's just about getting on and driving that, and it needs certainty in terms of supply to get investment. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the country to do that. So I see that as being a big opportunity, as well as these projects bringing direct benefits to communities, which we've been doing for the last 10, 15 years through our renewable projects anyway. We've got community projects such as the Rassay Hydro project, which received £300,000 from our Sustainable Development Fund. This fund has also helped with projects like the Fort Augustus community housing scheme, which has come from some of our wind farm funds there and hydro funds. So there are fantastic community schemes all across this region. There's dozens and dozens. As well as that, we've had 75 apprenticeships funded through schemes over the period, and I see that growing and continuing as we move into areas such as community ownership and more community funds come into the area via these types of projects. As well as that, there's also the environmental kind of benefits and impacts. Sure, there's kind of visual impact, and the projects have to go through a kind of major environmental impact assessment process. But there are opportunities in terms of peatland restoration, tree planting, education. We have the Dun the Glass scheme in the Great Glen, where we have funded the regional eagle management plan. It's fantastic science come off the back of that, and a better understanding of how golden eagles interact with wind farms and how they behave generally. Tracking these birds for the last 5 years. So projects such as those have been very, very successful. I see continuing. I see expanding into other areas. I see the opportunity for the funds to communities to grow. And I see opportunities for learning, jobs and investment across the region. So it's a challenging time, it's an exciting time. I think that events such as this, as I've said, and COP definitely kind of lead the way in terms of getting people's thinking, getting the direction, getting the narrative right. But I think we're setting a path now that does include a net zero at the heart of everything we decide and everything we do. And I'm very, very pleased to be playing my part of it, and I look forward to working with many of you and speaking to many of you over the coming years as we go on that journey together. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was really interesting, and it's great that you see the benefit of events like this, as they are extremely important, as Andrew alluded to there, to set the path to net zero. It's really interesting to hear about the rich heritage of renewables in Highland and how SSE Renewables is focusing on their green and resilient recovery, and how we really all do need to reevaluate how we live our lives and how it's really going to change how we use energy. It's great to see that they will be a principal partner at COP26 and that they are investing in funds to communities to improve sustainable development. And I think that key message of we must continue at pace is really important. And it's great to hear that they are aligning with the UN sustainability goals and the just transition. If you want to find out more about the just transition, this will be spoken about tomorrow by myself during the net zero session from 9:30 to 11. So now we will look at how the council are investing in solar to decarbonise our estates by installing solar PV onto our buildings. So we'll hear from Sarah Roberts, who's the trainee architectural technician, and she'll explain a little bit more.
Hi there, my name is Sarah Roberts and I'm currently the Technical Officer for the Salix Fund, which has assisted the Highland Council with installing solar PVs. Over the past couple of years, the Highland Council has been undertaking a programme of works to install solar PVs on strategic sites across the non-domestic estate. 29 sites have had PVs installed as part of their £2 million programme, including schools, offices, leisure facilities and depots. In total, just under 2 megawatts has been commissioned, with individual system sizes ranging from 20 kilowatts on a small office up to 270 kilowatts at one of our larger secondary schools. The project was designed to realise both carbon and financial savings through the displacement of an estimated 1.3 million kilowatts per hour of grid electricity in the buildings per annum. Essentially, the electricity generated feeds directly into buildings, meaning that we supply ourselves and consume less of the grid, which, as you have all seen from the media over the past couple of weeks, is fluctuating and susceptible to huge spikes. Over the past couple of years, the Highland Council has been undertaking a programme of works to install solar PV on strategic sites across the non-domestic estate. 29 sites have had PVs installed as part of the £2 million programme, including schools, offices, leisure facilities and depots. In total, just under 2 megawatts has been commissioned, with individual system sizes ranging from 20 kilowatts on a small office up to 270 kilowatts at one of our larger secondary schools. The project was designed to realise both carbon and financial savings through the displacement of an estimated 1.3 million kilowatts per hour of grid electricity in the buildings per annum. Essentially, the electricity generated feeds directly into the building, meaning we supply ourselves and consume less from the grid, which, as you'll have all seen in the media over the last few weeks, is fluctuating and susceptible to huge spikes. Here are a few examples of completed PV systems at our sites. On the previous slide was Milton of Leys Primary School, and here we have Invergordon Leisure Centre and Fortrose Academy. The design stage of the project was very much a data-driven exercise, with pre-project generation estimates derived from an industry-leading PV design software. This data-driven approach is being carried forward into the operation of the systems, with actual generation performance for the PVs being remotely monitored by a trusted software package. Furthermore, we were very strict with the site's appraisal process to ensure only favourable sites were progressed. Sites must have an annual electricity consumption of over 80,000 kilowatts per hour, an estimated array size of over 20 kilowatts based on the roof area to ensure greater generation and supply, on-site consumption of over 80% from generated electricity to ensure there will be limited wastage. This was supported by a robust roof assessments to ensure the additional weight didn't put the roof under undue pressure. At the time of recording, a full year's data was available for 13 of the earlier installed sites, with very encouraging results. For all 13 sites, actual generation was outperforming the pre-project estimate, with the total generation sitting at 14% higher than anticipated. Hopefully this answers the question of whether or not the sun shines enough in the Highlands for PV technology to be effective. A robust monitoring system has the added benefit of providing a strong visual interpretation of the PV performance as shown in the screenshot. We want the use of data in user-friendly formats such as this to continue to be a key tool in informing future project decision-making. The key benefit of the project clearly relates to the carbon savings associated with the displacement of grid electricity with renewable electricity generated on-site. The carbon saving equates to an estimated 275 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per annum. This may not sound like a lot, but when it's put into context, it's a real eye-opener. This 275 tonnes of carbon is equivalent to driving over 33,000 kilometres in an average car, or a single passenger making 750 return flights between Inverness and London, or the annual carbon sequestration potential of over 9,000 mature oak trees. With the PV systems having an estimated lifespan of 25 years and the technology advancements limiting performance degradation, we will continue to see benefits from this piece of work well into the future. Any project of this scale will encounter issues, and this was no different. As with all construction works, COVID-19 caused significant delays and required significant changes to how teams operated on site. Thankfully, we had ordered materials in advance of the more recent material shortages and cost increases. However, any future proposals would have to overcome significant financial barriers as shipping costs are excessive to say the least. The biggest challenge we have faced is grid restrictions. Areas in the Highlands are the most heavily constrained in the entire UK. This is partially down to a lack of suitable infrastructure, which is further compounded with huge amounts of private wind farms in operation. This has meant that a number of suitable sites with strong roof integrity, south-facing and high demand were ruled out because the DNO, the distribution network operator, have said that there is insufficient capacity in the grid. Self-supply and the ability to control our own future is essential for the organisation, as we have so many assets and such high electrical consumption due to the lack of mains gas. Lastly, and hopefully one we've managed to address in this brief presentation, is that solar does work in the Highlands. We have the stats to prove it, and we are already reaping the benefits, and will continue to do so for another 25 years, and with the right support and investment well beyond that. Thanks for your time and attention. I will leave you with a statement from Keith Masson, Manager of the Climate Change and Energy team.
Brilliant, thanks Sarah, and it's great to see that Highland does get the sun and can use solar. Who would have known? So to finish off the energy session, we will hear from Professor Susan Krumdig, Chair of the Energy Transition Engineering Island Centre for Islands Technology.
I'm the chair in Energy Transition Engineering at Heriot-Watt University, and I'm happy to tell you today about the research work that I'm going to be leading in the Scottish Islands on the project of decarbonizing, getting to net zero, getting to a sustainable energy system by 2030. Okay, fair enough, right? Luckily, I'm not doing it alone. We have partners in this, in the 3 islands, Outer Hebrides, Shetland, and Orkney, and we have partners with Heriot-Watt, EMEC, Community Energy Scotland, and Aquaterra. And I'm happy to tell you today about our exciting research program. We have a way that we're going about doing this. It's not academic research in the lab at Heriot-Watt. It's what's called action research. And action research is much more of a journey. The researchers are facilitators. They learn from the people in the islands, the companies in the islands, the councils in the islands, and they learn what people need, what they value, and they bring that together, collect data as appropriate, and then coordinate with cohorts of people to explore how they can change to reduce their fossil fuel use. We call this activity the Transition Lab. It sits within the Island Center for Net Zero, and it is, like I said, about a journey of multiple stakeholders. Now, in this interesting structural diagram of the activities of the Transition Lab, you can see that there's a lot of coming and going, and there's nobody excluded, and there's nothing we won't do. We will model, we will look at sustainability, we will look at pathfinding, and we'll work with oil companies, with whiskey companies, with households, with schools. So a very interesting mashup structure. Now, what are we actually working on? Well, if you're going to decarbonize by 2030, you're going to have to deal with the fact that most of the energy supply in the islands is petroleum. And what are you going to do about that petroleum? Use much less of it. All right, so the work of the research is to identify and carry out carbon downshift projects. One big carbon downshift project? No, many carbon downshift projects. But while we're doing that, you know what else? We can actually be doing regeneration projects. We can rebuild biocapacity and well-being while reducing carbon. Don't believe me? Cool. If we already knew how to do these things, we wouldn't need research, would we? So that's what we're doing here, is that kind of research. Stuff we don't know, which means we're going to get to be innovative. The innovative approach here comes from working on impossible problems, but also from working from a new perspective. most people are real familiar with the perspective of top-down. Top-down research is about building scenarios, looking at pathways, looking at new technologies that produce energy in new ways, new infrastructure, that sort of thing. Stuff from the top down, stuff that comes from outside of your own company or your own community. We're going to be doing action research, which is with the people from the ground up. So that means we're going to be working with communities, households, schools, farmers, fishers, companies, manufacturers, organizations, and we're going to be looking at, from their perspective, what do they really value, what do they need, what's important, what's essential, and what kind of performance are they looking for, and what kind of projects can we do. And that means that of course, all of this is still in the context of the top down, but the kinds of things we work on then are learning new things, learning new skills and new ideas. Yes, technology and built environment, but there again, it's quite different if you're looking at it from the ground up. And behavior and society, because that is where we're at. And when we're working on this, innovation is definitely there, but it's not innovation of new technologies that someone offshore can come up with. It's innovation in organization, in new ideas, new ways of having new businesses, and the ways to finance those, and of course the regulations that are required. What kind of problems are we going to be working on? Well, where's the petroleum? That's the question. And the petroleum is in transport. Yes, it is. It's in the lifeline services transport. It's in the transport of tourists to and from the islands, people around the islands. And that's done by ferries and by air, and once on the island, by land transport. So these are the major projects. You might be used to hearing about net zero in regards to grid electricity or something like that, but we're going to work on the petroleum itself, and yes, the built environment, because the homes and buildings need to be fit for the future of low carbon. And if you're going to work in that space where the petroleum is, what do you need? Well, first thing is data. So we're working on new ways of understanding and gathering data that isn't disconnected from the ground. It's not disconnected from the people using the data and who need the data. So this is another interesting area of research, is just the data itself. But then there's modeling, there's gamification, and there is projects which change something, which then we learn from. So that's the action research, where you actually perturb the systems by changing them, and then learn about that by observing what happens. Does any of that sound crazy? That's because the things we're talking about are wicked problems. What does a wicked problem mean? Well, a wicked problem is something that works great just the way it is. Thank you very much. And there is no question that petroleum, gas, and coal actually work pretty well. That's why we've been using them for 70 years and more. But what we do know is that the use of those fossil fuels in those very large quantities that we've gotten up to is not sustainable. The volumes have to go down. But we're using those fossil fuels to satisfy our needs. And so it seems really scary. We don't actually want to change this because we don't know what else we would do. But my gosh, those things cause harms. Yes, they do. So we have to change them, right? Yeah, but how can you change them? They work great. All right, that's a wicked problem. Wicked problems will defeat you. They will stop you from working on them. So what are we going to do? We're going to use a new methodology that has been developed to take on these wicked problems of fossil fuel downshift. And that new methodology is called transition engineering. In fact, there's a methodology within the toolbox of transition engineering that's called interdisciplinary transition, innovation, management, and engineering. And yes, it has the best acronym ever, in time. There's multiple steps, and in this stakeholder journey that you go through in this methodology, you're actually putting together engineers, policymakers, citizens, manufacturers, the people who are involved in that use of petroleum, and you're working through a process where you get to a point of insight in how you really can change. It's really fun and exciting. And I tell you what, new ideas and new innovations come out of this every time, and they're projects that we can do. Therefore, we're going to do them and learn from them and take these steps towards the future that we want to gift to our little ones. So thanks for listening, and definitely keep track of what's happening in the islands and join in.
A warm welcome. Hi everyone. Hello and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the fantastic talks of the energy section of our agenda and are now returning from your tea break, refreshed and ready for the land and sea section. So thank you very much, Katie, for taking us through section 1. My name is Joe Perry and I am Katie Andrews' colleague and fellow climate change coordinator. In this section, we're going to hear about blue carbon, a potential peatland World Heritage Site right here in the Highlands, tree planting, food systems, and an exciting new funding stream for green infrastructure. We are very excited to start this section with a keynote address from Ariane Burgess, who this year became an MSP for the Highlands and Islands, representing the Scottish Green Party. So over to you to start us off, Ariane.
A warm welcome to the Highland Council Climate Change Conference. Thank you to the organisers for this important event and for inviting me to speak in what is such an important year for Scotland hosting COP26. The world's eyes are on us and we are focused on delivering the greenest outcomes ever. The way we thought something could or should be done 2 years ago has changed by the pandemic, changed by Brexit, changed by our increased understanding that we are living in climate and nature emergencies. These emergencies aren't coming, we are living in them. As we recover from the pandemic, we must revisit and question the way we do everything. We must ask, how can we meet our local human needs while supporting our natural environment to regenerate? Right now, we have an opportunity to address the climate emergency and create more for people by learning to work with nature. The Highlands are often seen as peripheral, somewhere lovely to visit, but not to live. Increasingly, the land and the seas around the Highlands are viewed as solutions to problems being felt elsewhere in Scotland and the UK. We know that out of Scotland's renewable electricity generation capacity, the Highlands has great potential. To reach this potential means using the full range of renewable energy sources we have: tidal, hydro, offshore and onshore wind. In the rush to bring on our renewable energy sector, we must not do it at the expense of the communities and ecologies that populate our rural landscape. We know all too well the challenges of maintaining a population or repeopling. Renewable energy companies must involve local communities from the start. Even better, let's set up municipally owned renewable energy companies working with communities for the benefit of local people. A just transition means creating jobs and developing skills locally to ensure that Scotland can meet our future renewable energy needs. A just transition means that green job creation by design should improve opportunities for those who are disadvantaged by the current labour market. A just transition means that communities should have a say in how their townships, villages and towns are shaped. The Highlands has the potential to be the very epicenter of the green energy revolution, but we must learn from past mistakes and ensure that we don't get lost in thinking technology is the only thing that's going to get us out of this mess. Despite being a highly degraded landscape, the Highlands has the highest biodiversity of flora and fauna in Britain, hosting over 16,000 plants, animals, fungi and microorganisms. It's not an exaggeration to say that the Highlands are the lungs of mainland Scotland, and this gives me great hope. We have enough biodiversity left to work with. We can tackle the climate emergency and create jobs by responding to the nature emergency through the restoration of our Atlantic rainforest and peatlands and the weaving together of nature networks. Often, we focus on restoring biodiversity on the land, but what we do on the land impacts our seas, and what we do to our seas, though less visible, impacts our land. Highland has an impressive 21% of Scotland's coastline. For many of us, the sea isn't a postcard pretty backdrop. It's work and our way of life. The health of our inshore waters is the lifeblood of coastal communities. Let's ensure that we are protecting the biodiversity of our seas by moving away from harmful practices like scallop dredging and trawling, and support the potential for a myriad of small, sustainable inshore businesses. Whilst mammals often come to mind when we discuss marine biodiversity, we cannot underestimate the importance of aquatic plant life, which produce oxygen and pull CO2 out of the air. Sustainable fishing methods allow these ecosystems to thrive, and in turn, the density of healthy marine life increases. Birds and animals flourish, which in turn attracts environmental tourism. Healthy seas, the right renewable energy mix, and thriving local communities will lead to a sustainable and regenerative local economy. So what next? Let's keep asking, how do we create a dynamic and diverse regenerative Highlands at the centre of Scotland's future success? I'm sure over the course of the conference, you will gather the information and gain insights for a way towards the right action that supports our communities and natural environment to regenerate and flourish. This conference is the start of ongoing conversations, questioning, and collaboration. And over the course of the coming years, I look forward to collaborating with you in the economic, social, cultural, and ecological regeneration of the Highlands. Enjoy the conference, and I hope to meet you all in person very soon.
Well, thanks very much, Ariane. We're now going to move on to a really interesting talk from William Austin from St Andrews University, and this is about blue carbon. We'll find out what blue carbon is, what it means for us in the Highlands, and how we can best look after this fantastic resource. Over to you, William.
Good morning. My name's Bill Austin, and I'll be presenting today with fellow undergraduate Lucy Dornan. We're both based at the University of St Andrews, and I chair the Scottish Government's Blue Carbon Forum. Delighted to present at the Highland Council Conference on Climate Change, just in the lead up to COP26. I'm going to speak this morning about blue carbon, the idea of nature-based solutions for climate change, creating opportunities for people, and of course for biodiversity. In this first slide, an undergraduate student at the university has put together an infographic that highlights how these blue carbon systems can work. In this case, focusing on salt marsh habitats, which are very widespread around our coastlines. In fact, Highland Council is ranked second across Scotland in terms of the carbon stocks which are locked away in these salt marsh habitats. So these are important habitats, both for climate mitigation, taking in greenhouse gases, but also for climate adaptation. They sit at the interface along our coastlines and can provide very important adaptation to climate change and of course sea level rise that's tied with climate change. Blue carbon storage in these blue carbon habitats is of course globally important, and we know that about 83% of the global carbon cycle operates through our oceans. Our oceans are extremely important. 2% of these habitats represent the area of the oceans, and yet 50% of sequestration occurs in these habitats. So in terms of their area, it seems that they are very effective in carbon sequestration. And this is illustrated very nicely in this slide where we compare blue carbon habitats. We have tidal marshes and seagrass meadows here in Scotland, not yet mangroves, and comparing these to forest ecosystems. And this is an area for area comparison showing orders of magnitude more carbon sequestration, so the drawdown of carbon from the atmosphere into these ecosystems. And again, these same blue carbon habitats compared to forest ecosystems, where we see the significance both of the productive above ground biomass, but also the very important in tidal marshes and seagrass meadows in some parts of the world for the latter, but tidal marshes everywhere, the importance of this blue carbon store in the soils themselves. So as part of a UK-wide project at St Andrews, we've been collecting information from salt marsh habitats around Scotland. This is from marshes up at the head of the Kyle of Tongue. And what we're trying to do is understand the first order carbon stock in these habitats. And this has been an incredibly useful first order assessment to move us towards the implementation of these habitats into our national greenhouse gas inventory. So let me explain a little bit about this. This is my son standing on Morich Moor in the Highland region last October. And don't worry about the details in this slide. The key point here to make, I think, is that these habitats fit into the rule book that we have for COP26 and the guidelines for managing these habitats would allow us to account for the sinks of carbon into these tidal marshes. So this could be extremely important for us in terms of those hard to remove emissions, and these of course will be difficult to remove in some cases as we approach net zero, and therefore nature-based solutions, if we manage these places effectively, can create additional sinks for us. And this is a very nice example now from the Nig Bay RSPB reserve. It's a managed realignment site, realigned in February 2003. 25 hectares of land here, once salt marsh, reclaimed as farmland, and then returned to an intertidal wetland. And what we see here is a core on the left-hand side. It's a golf hole cutter, modified, showing a stratigraphy above a basal unit of inwashed marine sediments as the breaching occurred, and then the accumulation of organic rich soils in this salt marsh habitat. And the plot on the right-hand side shows the increase in the organic carbon in these soils over time. And so what we think is happening is that as we create new habitats, so this is a management intervention, creating a new habitat that creates a new sink for carbon. So this carbon is additional carbon and can be accounted for in terms of climate mitigation action. Of course, RSPB did this realignment because they wanted to create habitats for biodiversity, for migratory birds and so on. And so we should view blue carbon in the context of a whole series of ecosystem benefits. And I think this is the right way to view blue carbon in the context of a nature-based solution that provides all sorts of gains. And my final thought before handing over to Lucy is that I think blue carbon offers an emerging opportunity around the UK, here in Highland Council region, for a new commitment to nature that would allow us to tackle the twin issues of climate change and biodiversity loss. And of course, it creates all sorts of additional benefits, which I hope this photograph highlights and resonates as we approach COP26. So thank you for the invitation, and over to Lucy.
Okay, thanks very much for that, William. We're now going to hear from Lucy on her part of her work on the blue carbon project with St Andrews University. Over to you, Lucy.
My name is Lucy Dornan, and I'm here today to speak to you about my dissertation topic, which is titled Salt Marsh for the Future, a policy brief for the management and nature conservation of salt marsh habitats in the Highlands region of Scotland. So why are salt marsh habitats important? They're important for the following reasons. For climate, salt marsh habitats draw down large quantities of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere for their long-term storage within their sediment, providing a nature-based solution against climate change. For society, they protect communities from coastal flooding and provide a service of water filtration, keeping our waters clean. And for nature, salt marsh provides a habitat for terrestrial wildlife such as birds and a spawning ground for marine life. However, these habitats are under threat of degradation, a likely cause of land use change, pollution, sea level rise and agriculture. My research aims are threefold: to understand the overall diversity of salt marsh vegetation at different habitats around the North Highlands, to understand how communities in the Highlands engage with climate change as an issue and value salt marsh habitats as a nature-based solution for climate change, to understand what landowners think about the current land use policy to determine whether salt marsh habitats could be better integrated into future land use management policies. So why focus on the Northern Highlands of Scotland? The northern region has the second largest total area of salt marsh in Scotland, with some of the largest salt marsh habitats being Morrickmore and Nig Bay. So I'll now go on to discuss some of the initial results from a fieldwork site I visited, Lochfleet. So at a first glance, Lochfleet appears to be a healthy salt marsh, thereby providing benefits for climate, society and nature. It displayed all three zones of salt marsh vegetation, the lower, middle and upper zone, which are defined by their salinity tolerance. And it displayed a salt marsh community called SM16, which is one of the most productive at drawing down carbon dioxide. However, vegetation in the presence of artificial nitrogen, which is attributed to excess use from fertilisers, pollution in the waters and issues with waste, it causes the vegetation to become weaker over time as their root system shut down, as they don't have to work as hard to transport nutrients up through the soil to feed the above ground biomass. This causes the below ground biomass to reduce by around 60 to 70%. This limits their ability to sequester carbon, and it overall results in the marsh becoming destable, and it will eventually collapse over time. This is a really important factor to understand if these habitats are to be better used and better understand for climate change mitigation. So I'll now go on to discuss some of the initial findings from the community engagement survey. So I firstly asked, is climate change something that concerns you? And this sparked a really positive result. Most people that answered the survey answered definitely yes. So this indicates that communities in the North Highlands are engaging with climate change, which is a positive step in the right direction for addressing and mitigating climate change. I then asked, did you know that salt marshes, seagrasses and mangroves can store up to 3 to 5 times more carbon dioxide than terrestrial forests? The overriding response this time was more negative. Most respondents either answered probably not or definitely not. However, this creates an opportunity to raise awareness to the importance of these habitats for climate, society and nature. It's likely that increasing education will be well received, as the communities of the Northern Highlands have shown that dealing with climate change is very much on their agenda. If people are aware of the role that salt marsh habitats play in regulating climate and benefiting society and nature, they are more likely to value and respect them. We have recently seen the important role that appropriate media coverage can play in generating higher rates of engagement in other campaigns to protect habitats, such as the peatlands of the Flow Country. I will now show some of the initial findings from the Future of Land Management survey. This response rate was significantly less than the community engagement survey, as I limited respondents to only those who worked the lands surrounding the salt marsh habitats that I visited for my fieldwork. So I firstly asked about the future financial security of agriculture in Scotland due to the removal of the EU funding. Overall, 81% of respondents were concerned. This question highlights the pressure for a new land management policy. The next question I asked, do you think that land management under the ethos of the CAP in Scotland is something to continue despite Brexit? This sparked an interesting result. The overriding response was negative. Respondents either answered might or might not, or probably not. This helps to set the scene for a new land management policy by offering some guidance on what the new policy should entail. The CAP incentivised production, which did lead to some environmental damage and issues with waste. So I then asked a hypothetical scenario for land management in Scotland. So I asked about a policy that could direct greater financial flows towards nature-based solutions to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, and promote food security in Scotland. And asked, do you think that this is an optimistic vision for Scotland? And overwhelmingly, most respondents did answer as very optimistic. I then asked, if financial rewards were given to manage land for carbon sequestration and emission mitigation, would you feel incentivised to understand your carbon footprint and ways to reduce emissions on your land? This generated a positive result, whereby most respondents answered either definitely yes or probably yes. So the results to the previous 4 questions are useful in guiding the future of land management as they highlight the opportunities available. So many of our carbon-rich habitats, such as peatlands and salt marshes, are currently carbon sources rather than carbon sinks. This may restrict Scotland's ability to meet net zero emissions by 2045. However, landowners could be part of the solution. Managing their land in a way that enhances carbon sequestration could revert sources to sinks. In doing so, landowners should be rewarded for their valuable contributions towards Scotland's net zero future. We so often hear that we're running out of time. Highlighting this urgency seems to be having a more negative outcome, instigating that combating climate change is unattainable. However, we have the ability to act right now, educate and change our land management ethos to one centred around enhancing carbon-rich habitats, which are so abundant in the Highlands. With the right management framework that reflects the land and the people, the Highlands can become an exemplar carbon region. Thank you for listening today, and if you have any questions whatsoever or wish to discuss anything further, please email me on the address provided on the screen. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much for that, Lucy, and for William, for both your conversations about blue carbon there. Our next talk now is going to take the form of a conversation between myself and Councillor Craig Fraser. So this conversation is going to be about the importance of our pollinators and also why we have species champions, both with local politicians and national politicians, for some of our more endangered species. Pollinators have been in the public eye a little bit more over the past few years, as we have watched over a dramatic drop in pollinator numbers. There are some really exciting and really interesting projects around the UK, however, where areas of grass in fields and other communal areas are being left to grow wild, which is fantastic for wildflowers, and therefore for the pollinators as well. So we're now going to hand over to Craig and myself for this conversation about pollinators and in particular the solitary bee. So over to you, Craig.
Resonates as we approach COP26.
Hello and welcome to this conversation today about pollinators and the climate emergency. My name's Joe Perry and I'm the Climate Change Coordinator for the Highland Council, and I'm joined here today by Councillor Craig Fraser. So Craig, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Councillor Craig Fraser. I cover the ward is the Black Isle, and I'm species champion for the solitary bee and bottlenose dolphin at Highland Council.
Fantastic, and it's great to have you here for this conversation. We're going to move on to our first question, which is, how did you first become interested in the health of our pollinators?
Well, that's relatively easy one to answer. There was the launch of the Species Champion Initiative by Highland Council. I'm not sure when that date was, but I was inspired when I was given the book A Sting in the Tail by Dave Coulson. who I think is a Brummie, so that was an additional thing as well. His story on how he set up the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, I didn't know until I read the book that solitary bees and bumblebees are better pollinators than honeybees. I also made the mistake that when I had an allotment, I fertilised it, and the following year I lost 50% of my wildflowers, and that was a result in pollinators to the allotment. So that's basically where I became interested.
Okay, thanks very much. So for the next question now, so why are pollinators an important part of the solution to the climate emergency?
I mean, people forget that pollinators cover such a wide range of insects. And pollinators ensure the continuation of plant populations that lock up carbon in their woody stems, the roots, the bulbs, the tubers. And they're one of the best ways to restore natural habitats to help fight global warming, and that's through the natural regeneration of seeds. And for that, we need pollinators. Wild bees are more affected by climate change than by disturbance to their habitats. According to a team of researchers, the findings suggest that addressing land use issues alone will not be sufficient in protecting these important pollinators. But I could go on that if time allowed.
Yeah, please expand on that point.
It's up to us really to actually become educated. It's not really that difficult to just Google certain keywords and you'll get so many articles. I'll probably touch on that a little bit in probably another question that you may come up with.
Okay, great. I'll go on to the next one here, which is, how are pollinators being affected by our actions in the Highlands, and how are we helping and how are we harming pollinators?
Now, that's a very good question. I can probably say things that, as an elected member, that other people can't. Now, I can't remember the actual date that Highland Council agreed to reduce the use of commercial weed killers, such as glyphosate in public areas, play parks and around schools. That was a cross-party decision, and there's a lot of input from councillors, and that was very much a step in the right direction. However, since then, I think Highland Council has taken its eye off the ball, and we have instances in our Highland towns and villages where this guidance has been ignored. Cromarty was one example. Other examples were in Fort William and Loch Harbour. We need to use Highland planning policy that could be more integrated into the natural environment. We have aquaculture supplementary planning guidance that was put together. I don't think that gets really taken on board. I've digressed a little bit there. More green space, community woodlands, allotments, and don't cut roadside verges unless it's for road safety.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So to the next question now, what can individuals do to help pollinators, not just in their own garden, but just more broadly? Are there ways they can support national efforts?
Yeah, I think I touched on it on your previous question, is that to educate ourselves, don't be ignorant. There are many scholarly articles online, and a starting point is Google why are pollinators important to climate change, and you will get rakes of academic backed up articles. You can read as much as you want, but you only need to look at it for 5-10 minutes and it will give you a flavour of the scientific interest around the world into behavioural change that is happening to pollinators through our own lack of understanding. If you're fortunate to have in a garden, create a wildlife area. It doesn't need to be very big. One thing, try and degrade the soil because a lot of the soils are quite rich. So throw sand in it. I wouldn't go to the beach and get that, but just build the sand just to try and get some of the nutrients out. And that's far better for wildflowers because wildflowers many of them produce their own nitrogen. So let nature do its thing. And if you haven't got a wild garden, plant a window box or even just a flower pot. It doesn't need to be that big. And it doesn't need to be that expensive because people are on a budget.
Oh, that's great. I didn't realise that, especially about the degraded soil. It's very interesting. So to our next question now, what is the Highland Council doing to help pollinators?
I think, as I said at the very start, is that when Highland Council created the species champions, we need more of our councillors to actually get engaged with that process. Because once you start getting engaged with the process of being a species champion, I'm not sure if the Fonseca seed fly is a species champion, but it needs one. And people can Google the Fonseca seed fly. It puts you in touch with the environment and how we interact with the environment. Because without that knowledge, you're stumbling around in the dark. So the other thing that Highland Council did, it created biodiversity action plans, but we need to act on it. Reducing the use of glyphosate, setting up the Climate Change Committee. That is probably one of the most forward-thinking committees on Highland Council. I'm probably a bit biased because I'm on that committee, but it allows us to have specialist individuals to come in and address the committee and actually say what our actions are doing. Blue carbon, green carbon. People have no idea, and we need knowledge. And it's not difficult to get that knowledge. And the time allotted to these specialists is probably 5-10 minutes, but that should be sufficient to allow people who are watching the webcast just to do a quick Google search and educate yourselves. And once you've become a bit more educated, you can then start to lobby if you have the time and feel confident enough. Our politicians, irrespective of the party, and just be a nuisance. And keep asking questions.
Oh, absolutely. And on to our last question now. What gives you hope about the future of pollinators?
This was quite a useful question to ask, because I take the key word there is hope, because without hope, everybody may as well just pack up, go home and say, oh, well, it's going to happen anyway. But I think involving our children from a nursery age and getting the parents involved with the children at that early age. We have the Scottish Government Pollinator Strategy, which runs from 2017 to 2027. You could probably put the link out. If you went down the street and spoke to people about that strategy, I would be very, very surprised if anybody knew it existed. The pollinator strategy for Scotland sets out how Scotland can continue to be a place where pollinators thrive, along with actions that are needed to help achieve that objective. They also publish an annual progress report. Now, the other thing is that young people are speaking out about how they wish the planet to be. We need governments to actually listen to what they're saying, what they're being told. And I would also say that if you've chosen to be a species champion, do something about it. What's the point of being a species champion if you're not going to champion the species you've chosen to champion? The other thing is, lastly, quoting from, in fact, before I say that, we have the likes of Greta Thunberg coming through. Most people grew up with David Attenborough, Jacques Cousteau. These were the founding fathers, if you like. We have the Chris Packhams of this world and the Springwatch team and other naturalists coming through. David Bellamy was another one. There was Finlay from the Highlands. There was a young lass from Central Belt who was I think she was Girl of the Year the other year. I haven't got that in front of me, but I'm sure I sent that to you as an email. So we have a lineage now from the likes of David Attenborough through to the youngsters, and we need to keep that going. And we need to ask questions a child would ask. Why is this happening? And children will ask honest, naive questions, but in their naivety, they're very searching questions, and we mustn't dismiss that. And lastly, I'd say, quoted from A Sting in the Tail, the last sentence from Dave Golson makes a very valid comment. We've barely begun to understand the complexity of interactions between living creatures on Earth, yet we often choose to squander the irreplaceable, to discard those things that both keep us alive and make life worth living. Perhaps if we learn to save a bee today, we can save the world tomorrow.
That's a nice quote to end on. And yeah, the links that you mentioned, we'll make sure that those are in the digital handout, which you'll be able to find on the same Highland Council page where you found the links to join the conference. So thank you very much, Craig, for joining me for this conversation about pollinators and the climate emergency. And thanks to everyone who's watching today. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Okay, bye for now. Okay, thanks very much for that, Craig. Our next talk is about one of the most exciting projects taking place in the Highlands at the moment, the Flow Country World Heritage Site project. There is not currently a peatland World Heritage Site anywhere in the world, but that could soon change in our very own Flow Country if it does gain this highest of accolades. I will hand you over now to Project Coordinator Stephen Andrews. Over to you, Stephen.
For inviting me here today to speak to you. My name is Stephen Andrews. I'm the project coordinator for the World Heritage Bid for the Flow Country based at the Highland Council. And I'm going to talk to you today about well, the Flow Country as the next, as the UK's next World Heritage Site, and also its role that it plays in fighting climate change. So where is it? So a lot of you will be aware that the Flow Country stretches across much of Sutherland and Caithness. This red line just about encapsulates it, going basically from the Moyne Peninsula right across the east coast. And this is a topographically and climatically pretty diverse area, obviously wetter and more rugged in the west, and a bit drier and more rolling in the east. So when we look at this in a little bit more detail, and maybe with a little bit more confusion in this map, what we can see is that the proposed World Heritage boundary, defined by the green line, actually largely encapsulates areas that are already highly protected through the UK and Scottish law. The cross-hatched areas are triple SIs, but these also tend to be Ramsar sites and Natura sites as well. So what is the Flow Country? We hear this term, don't we? But what does it actually comprise of? Well, this gives a quite good idea of what it is. It's a large area of bog, but it's a very special kind of bog. So way back in 1925, Oswald defined the different types of bog that we see across, well, Europe largely. He defined a forest bog, a raised bog, a flat bog, and then my favourite one, particularly in his language of a train bedecken des moor, or what we would term a blanket bog. So this is a bog that actually just covers everything and slowly builds up. So there's a few important elements of the climatic situation you need to be able to develop a blanket bog, and this is largely, it's a bit of a kind of Goldilocks situation where you need it to be cool but not too cold, so you don't want permafrost or any of that sort of thing. You need it to be wet, but again, kind of not too wet, just kind of consistently wet, so consistent monthly averages. And I think when you look at these two maps, you can actually see that there's this kind of the area around Caithness and Sutherland has this kind of particularly average kind of figures, unlike anywhere else in the UK. And in fact, when you look at it on a global scale, we find that these conditions are only found in a handful of places around the world, making that setting really rather special. And we can see, yes, around Scotland and bits of Norway, areas of North America to some extent. Then we move down to the south, and we've got places like Tasmania, New Zealand, and bits of the far south of South America, where there's potential to have this sort of bog environment develop. So what does it look like? Well, we can look at it in this instance from a Google Earth kind of low angle image, and this is looking out across Knockfin Heights towards Morven, and you can see kind of the Murray Firth in the background there. What we see is this incredible area of kind of linked pools, and some of them without water, some of them with water, and then these kind of, in this instance, a watershed mire, as it's termed, with this kind of concentric pattern of pools. And these define kind of what we might think of as hydrological units, and they all tend to link up in a blanket bog system, so as we see it spread across vast areas. So if we turn our view round a little over to the west, this is looking towards Bengrave Moor and Bengrave Beg, and probably that's probably Ben Hope in the far distance there. We can see again these different styles of pools, with them forming down spurs, with them forming what we call on valley sides, and also in saddles between different hills. So you get all sorts of different kind of subtle changes across these areas, but the consistent element is that it blankets the whole area. And that's largely on the basis of this consistent rainfall, allowing for the plants to kind of keep on accumulating and not rotting away, which I'll come back to in a minute. So when we get down and have a wander out onto these features, this is near Crask, and we can see really characteristic kind of blanket bog species here, with the likes of these Racemytrium hummocks on the left, and then a whole range of different sphagnum mosses, beautiful red ones down on the right here. There are up to nearly 30 different sphagnum mosses present within the flow country, representing nearly 10% of the global total that you would see anywhere in the world. Other features in this, obviously, we've got little bits of heather poking out. We've also got this incredible blanket of reindeer lichens as well, which are a really interesting kind of structure when you get up close. So certainly the flow country, to appreciate it, you really need to get out there and kind of have a look at the different elements on all the different scales. So how does this work in fighting climate change? Well, effectively, it's the growth of all of this material, and then I think the next slide will show more clearly. It's not only the growth of the sphagnum mosses, and in this instance we've also got a nice sundew there, but it's the fact they grow in a waterlogged setting. This is on the right, sphagnum mosses growing in a pool, and a nice bog bean flower sticking up as well. Because they're growing in these waterlogged settings, what they are doing is they're locking in that carbon, so they're not rotting and degrading away and letting out all that carbon back out into the atmosphere. They're locking it down into the peat. And that peat's been forming for the last 8,000 years. So there's a real significant store of carbon in there, and it just keeps on getting added to. And it's this sequestration, as we call it, that's so important when we come to think about bogs and blanket bogs, and particularly the flow country being one of the best examples in the world that we can turn to. So in terms of its kind of global significance, I suppose, it is this carbon sequestration that's so important. And globally, we know that peatlands, although they cover only about 3% of the world's land surface, they hold nearly 30% of the total carbon stored on land throughout the world. So that gives some idea of just how important these are in regulating the Earth's climate. There's a whole lot of other facts and figures there, but I think that's probably the most striking one of their importance relative to other carbon stores. So why World Heritage Site? Well, World Heritage is about a few different things. It's about protection, and it's about education, and also kind of managing sustainable development. I think protection is kind of the key element that I want to just talk about here briefly, and it comes down to the criteria that it's being nominated on. And that is, put simply, the fact it's globally the best example of near natural blanket bog to be found. And the second element of that is the outstanding example of ecological processes that it demonstrates, and that's all to do with this carbon sequestration, the capture and the burial of carbon. And then there's the third element, that it supports effectively an outstanding biodiversity representative of blanket bog ecosystems. So there we're talking about all these amazing plants we see, from the carnivorous kind of sundews through to the 30 odd sphagnum varieties, and then of course all the bird life that it supports as well. The bird life is particularly interesting in that what we see is an overlapping of different populations from what are often quite distinct kind of bioclimatic zones. So I'd just like to say thank you for taking the time to listen to what I have to say about the flow country and how important it is in the storage of carbon and the sequestration thereof also. If you're looking for more information on this project, we have a website, flowcountry.org, and please feel free to visit that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Stephen. So we're now going on to our next video now, which is going to be from David Hetherington. and he is going to talk about woodland expansion in the Cairngorms National Park Authority and how this relates to climate change. So over to you, David.
Hello, my name is David Hetherington. I work as the Woodland Advisor for the Cairngorms National Park Authority, the organisation that looks after the UK's largest national park. One of the special features of the national park is its woodlands, which range from the beautiful birch woods and aspen woods of the valley floor through the ancient Caledonian pine woods right up to the montane scrub woodlands high up in our mountains. These woodlands punch well above their weight in terms of looking after rare and endangered flora and fauna. They're a minority habitat. They only cover about 15 or 16% of the national park, well below the national average, and yet something like 40% of the national park's biodiversity is found within these wooded environments. Woodlands can contribute a great deal in the fight against climate change. They can, of course, sequester a huge amount of atmospheric carbon. They can also aid in natural flood management, helping to slow down water flow at times of high rainfall, and equally help store water in the landscape during periods of drought. And one thing they can also help with is shading watercourses from rising water temperatures. We're seeing temperatures in some of our watercourses of 27 degrees, which is well beyond the point of 23 degrees when we know that Atlantic salmon start to shut down and die. So we really need to reduce water temperatures, and having trees along the riverbanks in the summer months will help to cast shade on them and keep the temperature down. And of course, having trees on the riverbanks will mean that in autumn we have leaves and other organic matter entering the aquatic system, feeding invertebrates and a whole range of other species from then on. Those riparian woodlands also have the useful function that by being long and sinuous in their shape, they can actually act as habitat corridors, woodland corridors snaking across the landscape and connecting woodlands together. And that can all help with allowing species to adapt to climate change by migrating across the landscape to reach landscapes further north, for example, or perhaps higher up the hill to help them cope with the rising temperatures. So here in the Cairngorms National Park, we wish to look after the woodlands we already have, but we also have ambitious targets for expanding our woodland so that they can contribute more in the fight against the biodiversity crisis and the climate emergency. Currently, we have targets of expanding our woodlands by 1,000 hectares per year, which is above the national target average for Scotland as a whole, so ambitious. And we have met those targets, but going forward, we wish to increase those targets so we're expanding our woodlands by even more. We're especially keen to see more native woodland because of its significant contribution to flora and fauna. We wish to see woodlands expanding up hillsides and creating a more natural, higher tree line. We're really keen to see woodlands connecting better across the landscape so that there's a strengthened forest habitat network across the national park, which allows species to disperse, to find mates, to find new habitats, and indeed migrate and adapt to climate change. Woodland expansion in the Cairngorms has been happening through a mixture of planting and natural regeneration. And the level of natural regeneration is far higher than any other part of Scotland. We have thousands of hectares where nature is ensuring that the right tree is in the right place. And that's the sort of healthy mix that we wish to see going forward. By creating bigger, better, more joined up woodlands, we're creating a more resilient habitat that can continue to be home for a wide range of animal and plant life, from the tiny wood ant to the delicate twinflower and the charismatic wildcat and capercaillie. We would love the Cairngorms to be a more resilient, more diverse, more vibrant place for both nature and people. We would love to hear your views, not just on how woodlands can contribute to fighting climate change, but on a whole raft of issues from housing to tourism to nature conservation. We're currently consulting on the next National Park Partnership Plan to cover 2022 to 2027. So please take the time and let us know your thoughts by visiting the consultation website, which is
cairngormsviews.co.uk.
Okay, thanks very much for that, David. So as we've just heard from that video, we have some remarkable woodland projects ongoing in the Highlands. Woodland projects and management across Scotland are celebrated each year by Scotland's Finest Woods Award. We're now going to take a short look at an award-winning Highland woodland. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. We just had a slight problem uploading the video. It was stuck on a bit of a loop there. So we're going to move straight to our next video now, which is going to look at a rewilding project. It's actually quite similar to the video we were going to show you. Rewilding is perhaps a term that we are becoming more familiar with now, although perhaps it conjures up images of wolves and bears and elk and lynx roaming in the hedgerows. Rewilding, however, can also take the form of native woodland expansion, which we're going to have a little look at now, and we're going to hear about this from Glenafric. So we'll go on to this video now.
Afric Highlands is an ambitious landscape-scale project encompassing about 2,000 square kilometres in the Highlands of Scotland. The main objective of Afric Highlands is to restore nature on a grand scale, restoring habitat and biodiversity and recovering the land's ability to sequester carbon. And the means of achieving this will involve many people. It's a collaboration of landowners, communities, could be schools, small businesses, and all sorts of other stakeholders who live in the project area and further afield. We're at the beginning of a journey that's going to take many years to reach its final destination. The journey itself we envisage being about 30 years, which is the time it'll take to start seeing some significant changes in the landscape.
Trees are the engines of change, the catalyst. You know, we've lost the trees, we've lost the ground cover, we've lost a whole lot of the soil.
If we can use our local resources and bolster those local resources, then we can begin to develop a local circular economy that will in itself be beneficial to people and the landscape.
For people to respect and understand and care for nature, we need to give them the opportunity to actually see it in action.
There's a potential for a new economy to emerge out of this project. Local food, sustainable timber products, construction timber, and slow tourism.
If there's a way you can regenerate a woodland into native forest, while at the same time it's creating more industry out of it, you've got to look at it long term. That might actually be more financially sustainable and more beneficial to the community than just a blanket stick of spruce.
The next few years are critical. The more we can make use of local resources and start to develop their potential, the better it will be for bolstering the local economy.
Okay, fantastic. Some beautiful images there. Our next talk is going to take us in a slightly different direction, as we're now going to hear about sustainable food systems. Professor Pete Iannetta will take us through some of the most important current themes in ensuring that we have food security in a way which puts less stress on the environment. So over to you, Pete.
Hello. My name is Pete Iannetta and I'm a biologist and food systems scientist based at the James Hutton Institute. I'd like to thank the organisers of this meeting for the opportunity to talk to you all today, though I must say I have a rather tough task of presenting on sustainable food system trends in Scotland and in only 5 minutes. Though you'll appreciate the food system has many components and the James Hutton Institute innovates from farm to fork. That is, we work across the value network and we include looking at perspectives on a diverse range of topics, and these range from research on land use, biology and ecology to sustainable business models and of course human behaviour. But I'll do my best to give you a quick overview of what we're up to. First, let me set some relevant background. The Sustainable Food System Agenda is not new, and the capacities and functions of the James Hutton Institute emerged exactly 100 years ago this year, as the James Hutton Institute was formed in 1921 from a merger of the Scottish Crop Research Institute and the Macaulay Land Use Research Institute. The Institute is the first of its type in Europe combining interdisciplinary capacities to address key global issues and facilitate sustainable economic development. I'll not dwell on this slide for too long, but if you do not know of James Hutton or his legacy, I'd recommend this Nature paper. Hutton's perspectives are a great foundation for our mission as a research and technology organisation. I would also like to highlight that the James Hutton Institute works across Scotland and internationally. Its work is carried out in full partnership with other main research providers, or MRPs, and these are listed here for your information. I expect this presentation will be available to you all later as a PDF, and should you wish to dig deeper on certain aspects, orange text provides readers with a hyperlink to further information. Sustainability is now recognised as the new language of modern marketing. I welcome this and hope it becomes the foundation for all marketing. But I point you towards this report, the EU Agricultural Market Outlook, which highlights that novel and alternative production systems will drive market development. We see that consumers are increasingly aware of sustainable food and question what constitutes truly sustainable food. We see the emergence of novel labelling approaches, and also this demands new value chain and product assessment frameworks and tools. In these contexts of multifunctional solutions, sustainable economic development and modern marketing, the James Hutton Institute is expanding again. It's now much more than a centre for agricultural research and crop breeding and offers unparalleled capacities as a knowledge, innovation and technology hub. There have been major investments in establishing new flagship centres. These include the Advanced Plant Growth Centre, the International Barley Hub, and the Centre for Agricultural Sustainable Innovation. As my time is limited, I cannot present on the specific capacities and potential offered by each of the Institute's flagships. However, do please use the links provided to discover these in more detail. To highlight just one of our flagships, the APGC, or Vertical Farming Capacity, it offers improved food system opportunities and entry to a market currently estimated at $10 billion. In fact, the capacity offers much more than sustainable food potential, and ultimately the innovations established aim to empower a wide range of sustainable businesses locally and globally. We also have an ever-growing number of campus partners. These are a diverse range of businesses, and this accommodation is strategic, as such placement allows closer ties between research with sustainability and business aspects to foster co-innovation and value addition. The examples shown here highlight partnerships based at our Dundee campus. The examples listed on this slide highlight partnerships based at our Aberdeen campus. The James Hutton Institute also has several farms, and these are also being developed as additional innovation flagships. Here I highlight the Glensoch Climate Positive Farming Initiative, and you can see that we have three main pillars to achieve zero carbon systems. And you'll also see here some innovations listed under each of the pillars. I hope you might also take time to view the videos highlighted here. They're also available on the James Hutton Institute's YouTube channel. We also work with local businesses across Scotland. Here's one such effort pursued with our Bikie, a distillery based near Montrose. The distillery manager is undertaking a PhD, which is jointly supervised by Professor Graham Walker at Abertay University and myself, and we identified methods to distill peas for neutral spirit production. And with collaborators based in Ireland and Wales, we also delivered an insightful LCA, or life cycle analysis. The LCA accounted for the impacts of using peas and the novel processing and highlighted the greatly reduced environmental impacts of distilling peas. In fact, the LCA also highlighted environmental gains and allowed marketing of our Bikie's climate positive Nadar products. Such co-innovation has improved the sustainability of our Bikie farm too, from better crop rotations to provisions of high protein co-product that improves feed self-sufficiency on the farm. We're now exploring the co-product potential as a novel premium human food. The new methods and climate positive products have attracted a lot of attention. However, it is perhaps the particular business academia approach to co-innovation that has attracted most attention. I also direct your attention to the outputs of this workshop, organised and led by Zero Waste Scotland. The talks captured here presented a range of other innovations, including the use of algae, insects, fungi, and plant-based pharma, among others. All sustainable business innovations are welcome, of course, though I am biased in that my interest is captured by those which offer multifunctional solutions for more resilient, circular local economies. In addition to my Scottish Government-focused research on ecological food systems, I'd like to highlight here some of my other and mainly EU-funded projects, also some peer-reviewed science publications. But finally, I'd like to thank you for listening, and please do contact me directly if there's anything you'd like to discuss.
Okay, thanks very much, Pete. Our next video comes from the National Trust for Scotland, in which Stuart Brooks, the Head of Conservation and Policy, will explain how the Trust is responding to the climate and ecological emergency. So over to you, Stuart.
Hello everyone, my name is Stuart Brooks and I'm the Head of Conservation and Policy at the National Trust for Scotland. And I want to say just a few words about the response that the National Trust for Scotland is making to both mitigating and adapting to climate change. Most of you will know something about the Trust, but perhaps not the breadth of what we do across Scotland. And in the context of climate change, the scale of the buildings, land and access infrastructure we manage for public benefit. Pretty much our entire operation is exposed to the impacts of climate change. Perhaps not as swiftly as the health pandemic, when we had to close all of our properties where we would normally have welcomed over 4 million people a year, but potentially no less catastrophic when we think about the risks to the physical damage from extreme weather. So over the last 18 months, we've been working with a range of organisations to better understand the risks of climate change to the NTS estate. We've undertaken a risk assessment across all of our sites and also in parallel worked with 3 Keele, Historic Environment Scotland and the National Trust to add to the existing UK map, which was published at the beginning of the year. This map's a very powerful visual representation of spatial risk, shifting from overheating in the south to flooding, storm damage, coastal erosion and slope failure as you go further north and west. We've also been testing some more detailed risk assessment tools, notably the Climate Vulnerability Index with Historic Environment Scotland, and we've been doing that on St Kilda, the only UK's dual World Heritage Site. So the archaeology there, the historic buildings and over 1 million nesting seabirds are all vulnerable to climate change there. Putting some quantification on both the risks and assessment of ecosystem stocks, such as the storage of carbon and services, things like flood mitigation, is obviously an evolving science. And we're currently working with Dieter Helm's Natural Capital Research Company to complete a natural capital assessment for our entire green estate. Some aspects of methodology are more refined than others. So woodland and peatland are probably the best known, and both have their respective carbon codes. Our previous work estimated the total store of carbon on National Trust for Scotland upland properties at 27.5 million tonnes CO2 equivalent. So that's about a third of the annual greenhouse gas emissions in Scotland. The equivalent figure for NTS woodland, which extends to just over 5,000 hectares, is 2.4 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent, including a number of large estates in the Highlands, including Glencoe, Torridon and Kintail. So on the woodland front, we have a plan in process just now for a 250 hectare riparian woodland scheme along the banks of the Geldy Burn, which is out in the kind of remote area to the west of Mar Lodge. One of the key drivers of that is the concern around water temperatures and its impact on the Atlantic salmon and the freshwater pearl mussel in particular. Over the last decade, we've also been restoring damaged peatland across our estate, shifting areas of bare peat, currently acting as a carbon source caused by historic burning. And by the way, the Trust has a no-burn policy across all of our estate, draining and overgrazing into a carbon sink. We've actually got some diggers on the ground right now at our Grey Mare's Tail Nature Reserve down in the Borders, and also at our Marlodge estate in the Cairngorms National Park. Just before I kind of leave the natural world, I just wanted to very briefly mention another key area of climate risk for us and also response. This is pretty well illustrated here by the box, this kind of huge chainmail structure which we built over the Hill House, Charles Rennie Mackintosh's domestic masterpiece in Edinburgh. I guess Mr. Mackintosh has to take some of the blame for the fact that the house is leaking, and somebody just described it as dissolving like an aspirin in water. But the more rain and severe weather events we get, the more our buildings will need to be adapted to be able to cope with that. So the box is only a temporary solution to allow the house to dry out while we find a more permanent solution. But it's certainly not the only historic property we have which is suffering and will need some urgent attention if we're going to protect these places for future generations. I just wanted to end by mentioning COP26. I suspect all of your presenters today will be doing likewise. So for ourselves, we're working with some Scottish, UK and international partners, including the Scottish Government, the UN Environment Programme and Wetlands International, to bring peatlands to the COP for the first time in a dedicated peatlands pavilion. So not just a physical pavilion in Glasgow, we've also created a virtual pavilion. And there in both the physical and the virtual pavilions, we'll be showcasing what we've managed to achieve. So in terms of practical restoration, and also we wanted to bring the peat-free gardening message to the COP as well. So, you know, our messages there to the COP are, we've got all the science and we've got the practical know-how, certainly enough to know what to do. We just need to get on with it and in particular massively upscale our efforts beyond restoration of hundreds of hectares a year to thousands of hectares a year. And we can only obviously support that through a shift in the focus of both public funding, but also to bring alongside private capital into that endeavour as a partnership. And to come back to the horticulture issue, we've really got to keep peat in the ground. So it's not used in horticulture for the National Trust of Scotland or the National Trust down south. So, you know, collectively, we've got hundreds of really top quality gardens open to the public, and we've been operating on a peat-free basis to deliver all of those. That's I think the message that we've got both to the public but to governments as well, and government do have a role in here, I think, to support the industry, the kind of peat-based media industry, to transition now to a fully peat alternative industry, and they've been prevaricating really, I'd say, for 20 years, and I think the time has to stop, and that means really the government needs to bring in a legislative ban on the sale of peat for horticulture in the UK. So there are two big messages to the COP, and I guess my message to everybody on this conference is that, yeah, we can do it. We know what to do. We just need to get on and do it, and we need to do it at a landscape scale. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Stuart. And I just want to repeat Stuart's suggestion that during COP, even if you cannot attend, you can go to the online Peatland Pavilion, where not only will you see the National Trust for Scotland's work, but you'll also see the Flow Country World Heritage Site, which will have a presence at both the online Peatland Pavilion of COP and also the in-person Peatland Pavilion at COP. So we're now going to return to our theme of sustainable food systems. We're going to hear from the Highland Good Food Partnership, which I hope some of you have already heard of. This video will set out a collective vision for a resilient, regenerative and supportive Highland food system.
knock-on effect on the volatility of the global commodity market, supply chains and the cost of food. More than ever, a diverse, resilient and local food system is needed. The way in which we are producing our food is seriously affecting global and local biodiversity. Land use change is wiping out natural ecosystems, and the removal of wildlife corridors is significantly reducing the refuge space for wild species. Pesticide, fungicide, herbicide and fertilizer use is significantly reducing the number of insects in soil, bees and butterflies to pollinate plants. Many populations are at a critical level. While our food is predominantly produced in a way that damages the environment, so too is it damaging our health. Dietary-related illness is at an all-time high, and unhealthy food is often cheaper to buy, while good, healthy, organic options are lower in quantity and higher in price. Good, healthy food should be something that people feel they have the right to access, like fresh air and clean water. We need to work on many levels to achieve the changes to the current food system, because we simply cannot afford the one we've got. Highland Council have recently signed the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, showing their commitment to work on a sub-national level to tackle the climate and nature emergencies with sustainable and just food policies. We're excited to work with Highland Council to realise this, whether it's through improving allotments and access, improving the procurement system to provide local food in local schools, or supporting local producers and food businesses to improve our local food system. In this video, you'll hear from a number of people involved in the Highland Good Food Partnership. Jose will tell us about our contributions to COP. Angus is going to talk a little bit about the Greenhouse Project Group. And greenhouses in the Highland could improve our local food system significantly. They improve availability, they can lengthen the growing season while reducing the Highlands' reliance on imports from Europe or further afield. This is an important aspect to consider as part of the Highlands' plans for climate adaptation, as many areas where produce is sourced will be affected by climate crisis effects, such as drought, flooding and heat waves. Elle gives us a really positive insight into community food and the benefits it can bring to communities and people's health and well-being. And finally, Tanya Aliod speaks on behalf of the Circular Economy and Food Waste Group, sharing their vision so far and the benefits of converting food waste into useful composts or animal feeds and the carbon emissions saved in doing so.
People's reactions to the climate emergency tend to swing between the macro scale of COP26 and the micro scale of recycling. Community food provides the place between, where individuals can come together to make real positive change bigger than their own household. Through community food, we can feel connected to our land, ourselves, our wider community, and the bigger scale of global climate action. It's a perfect vehicle for a systems-based approach to tackling the diverse health and environmental challenges we face as a nation. There are amazing community food initiatives all through the Highlands. Community gardens like this one, markets, gatherings, fridges, education, orchards. The COVID pandemic has highlighted that communities with these existing strong networks are resilient and agile. We're better able to look after our people in the face of a crisis. Everybody eats, so it's a way to engage all members of a community equally. At its heart, community food is a practice of sharing. Food, seeds, conversations, skills, responsibility, vision. We grow culture as well as carrots. What if every community in the Highlands had this? What if every Highland child grew up taking it as normal that we share food together, that every person has a right to food that is good for them and good for the planet? What can you do to make it happen?
Highland Good Food Partnership have been taking part in Nourish Scotland's local Fork to Farm dialogues. These local dialogues have been taking place in 20 communities across the 4 continents. Their aim is to bring together farmers and city people, namely policymakers, to build relationships and trust so that the voices of farmers are no longer absent from policy discussions. On November the 5th at COP26, Nourish will host the Global Fork to Farm Dialogue, bringing together 100 farmers and 100 local government representatives from across the world. Highland Good Food Partnership will have participants tuning in from the Highlands to take part. This day is about frank discussions and learning, not only between farmers and local government, but between all participants from across the world. This collaborative approach is at the heart of the way we work, and we look forward to everything we will learn to continue working on this project beyond COP26, to continue encouraging everyone to work together to make the changes we need for food and climate.
My name is Angus Marland. We've been exploring controlled environment agriculture, abbreviated to CEA, a group of technologies which is already fairly well developed in Canada and Scandinavia. CEA complements seasonal field crops by using greenhouses with innovative glazing, lighting, and heating systems to enable the year-round production of vegetables. Our group is working with the Scottish Agricultural Organisations Society to explore the feasibility of a 1 hectare CEA system near Inverness and up to 6 quarter hectare satellite systems throughout the Highlands. We will examine the integration of food production, processing, marketing and sales with a view to adding value and creating skilled full-time jobs. Controlled environment agriculture in Scotland will, of course, need the development of horticulture courses that include this high-tech sector. We believe that a CEA enterprise in Highland, along with Highland Good Food Partnership's other initiatives, will improve people's health and well-being, help build resilient communities, educate young people about sustainability, and make a positive contribution to the climate emergency.
Hi, I'm Tanya Aliod, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about the vision for our project and also what we've done so far. The vision is in 2 parts and it's very straightforward. The first part is to reduce the amount of food waste that we actually produce in Highland as communities and as businesses. And the second part is to view food waste not as a waste material, but as a resource that we can use to make other things like compost or animal feed. So we're not putting stuff into landfill. Food is something that we all connect with every day, which means it's something that we can influence at an individual level. It may surprise you to know that 1/3 of all food produced globally ends up being wasted. So that's an area under production that's greater than the size of China. The other thing about food waste is that in the UK, most food waste is generated in the domestic home environment. And in Highlands specifically, every household generates 3 kilograms of food waste weekly. That's 1/3 of what goes into your residual bin. So we believe that tackling food waste, which contributes to about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, is a good place to start that we can all get involved with. Well, most importantly, we've started the conversation. We want everybody to start having a conversation, whether that's around your kitchen table, your school classroom, or your business, or when you're out eating in a restaurant. Start the conversation. What happens to the food waste once it goes in your residual bin? We've actually managed to bring together some key organisations, including the Highland Council, Highlands and Islands Enterprise, the Cairngorms National Park, and we're now collaborating to address the issue and try and find solutions that will provide an opportunity for everyone to have a better Highland economy and get food waste tackled. So let's get it sorted.
Hi, my name is Martin Sherring. I'm one of the co-founders of the Highland Good Food Partnership. I hope it's clear from what you've just seen and heard that we can't tackle climate change without a radically different approach to food. But it isn't just climate change we're concerned about. We also have crises in biodiversity and health, which are largely driven by the food we eat and the way it's produced. But in amongst all this gloom and doom, we also have some pioneering examples of fantastic practice in the Highlands, from therapeutic growing schemes at Regmore to crofters and smallholders feeding hundreds of families from tiny areas. We have farmers adopting mob grazing and agroforestry to reverse wildlife loss and store carbon in their soil, and we have community schemes helping people take the first steps to grow their own, teaching them how to cook their own, and sharing out food that would otherwise have gone to waste. What we're doing is making the links between these inspiring examples, supporting others to follow their examples, and working with Highland Council and other organisations to reshape the Highland food system so these pioneers become the norm rather than the exception. If you want to join us, check our website, highlandgoodfood.scot.
Okay, thanks everyone at the Highland Good Food Partnership. I'm sure this talk of food is getting some people hungry. We've just got a few videos left before we get to our lunch break, and during the lunch break there'll be a beautiful video montage for you to watch with whatever you're eating. And sticking with the theme of food, we're going to hear now from Kirsty Ellen, who is the Highland Council's food growing coordinator, about the Highland Council's food growing strategy. So over to you, Kirsty.
Hi Kirsty, thanks for coming along today to help us celebrate Scottish Housing Day. Can you tell us just a bit about what you do in your role that helps to mitigate the effects of climate emergency?
Yeah, thanks Mandy. I'm the Community Food Growing Coordinator at the Highland Council, and on Scottish Housing Day I wanted to highlight the really important role that outdoor space around our housing can play in helping us mitigate climate change. The grassy areas, parks, play spaces and areas where we connect with nature are all part of making a place a home and help with our sense of well-being. But not only that, the green spaces around our communities can play a really valuable role in our response to climate change. Communities using these areas for food growing and to enhance wildlife and biodiversity is a part of the action that many people are taking in their personal response to climate change, which in turn improves our communities and creates opportunities for people as well. And we're here at Eden Court with the flower beds that have been planted by Incredible Edible Inverness with vegetables, herbs and flowers, as well as the planters along the banks of the River Ness that they've planted up as well, as an example of how community volunteers are improving our natural environment through food growing. The Highland Council's community food growing strategy aims to support groups like Incredible Edible Inverness and the many others across Highland who are also doing really good work in growing food in our communities to realise their ambitions and raise awareness with those who have not yet begun to grow food in their communities of the benefits, to improve our green spaces all around our towns and villages and create more opportunities for people to learn, connect socially, eat healthy food and as well as enhance nature. Community food growing has a role to play in many important agendas in Scotland, including enabling our communities to contribute in a practical way to reducing carbon emissions from food and making our built environment more biodiverse. So I want to encourage anyone who is thinking about community food growing, whatever the scale, to give it a go. And if the Highland Council can help, please contact me or your local tenant participation officer for support. If you'd like to know more about the Highland Council's community food growing strategy, it's available on the Highland Council website, or you can email me kirsty.ellen@highland.gov.uk. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Kirsty. We're now going to hear from the Scottish Association for Marine Science. This organisation is committed to communicating their research on our marine environment to the public. Their video today will cover marine protected areas, explaining what they are and why they are important.
I'm here today at Loch Creurin, a sea loch on the west coast of Scotland that is home to flameshell beds and reefs made by animals such as organ pipeworms. In order to conserve their health, the loch is designated as a marine protected area. My name is Natasha Bryan, and I'm here today to find out what marine protected areas actually are.
A marine protected area, or otherwise known as an MPA, is an area of the sea that is protected and managed to help achieve the long-term conservation objectives of our marine environment and its biodiversity, for the benefit of us all, but also for generations to come.
In most MPAs, certain features are protected. This means that there are areas where the MPAs, the normal activities and human use can still carry on. The activities that put pressure on the protected features, well, they have to be considered seriously and managed properly.
There are different types of marine protected area, and these are designated under different national and international legislation. By 2030, 30% of the global oceans are to be protected as marine protected areas.
Marine protected areas are used to protect many different things, such as plant and animal species, entire habitats, special seafloor features, and even historic landmarks.
So, an MPA is a part of the sea that is protected for a specified characteristic. Human activities that could harm the protected species, feature, or habitat may be restricted or carried out in different ways in parts or all of an MPA, making sure our seas remain as spectacular as this.
Okay, so we now go on to our final video of this session, and this is a video recorded by myself. I'll be giving an overview of a new funding opportunity to develop green infrastructure, which the Highland Council has been fortunate enough to secure. So after this video, we'll be moving to the lunchtime video montage. Hello, my name is Joe Perry and I work as Climate Change Coordinator for the Highland Council. When I first came to the Highlands, it was to work on the Flow Country World Heritage Site project, which is also the topic of a talk today. And I fell in love with the peatlands of Caithness and Sutherland. With this as my background, I'm truly fortunate that any projects featuring bogs or marshes tend to fall within my remit, and it is one of these projects which I'm very pleased to present to you today. My talk today will focus on a new investment programme, the Green Growth Accelerator, or GGA, which will help the Highlands towards a just transition to a net zero emissions economy. I will explain what the GGA is, why we applied for this funding, what we will use the money for, and what impact we believe this could have for the communities and ecosystems of the Highlands. The Green Growth Accelerator is a Scottish Government investment programme which was designed to speed up delivery of low carbon infrastructure projects across Scotland and provide the extra resources and technical support that local authorities, such as the Highland Council, need to get projects off the ground more quickly. Earlier this year, the Scottish Government, with the support of COSLA and the Scottish Futures Trust, launched a call for applications from local authorities to secure one of 6 Pathfinder places to develop their business cases for the Green Growth Accelerator model. Just a few weeks ago, we were delighted to hear that the Highland Council's application to develop nature-based solutions for flood mitigation was accepted as a Pathfinder project. This means that we will receive support to develop our ideas over the coming months to make sure that we make the best use of this incredible opportunity. Before I start talking about the green infrastructure project we intend to undertake, I wanted to give an overview of the Dynamic Coast report, which partly informed our bid for funding. Dynamic Coast is a report which was commissioned by the Centre of Expertise for Waters to provide the strategic evidence base on the extent of coastal erosion in Scotland. This report will be used by the Scottish Government and public sector to aid decision making and indicate areas at risk of coastal erosion. The report also contained the latest climate change projections for sea level rise, which is important for adaptation to our changing climate. Some of the key results from the national report include that coastal erosion currently affects 46% of soft shorelines across Scotland, which is an increase from the 38% identified in 2017. The rate of coastal erosion is expected to increase under all greenhouse gas emission scenarios. Under a high emission scenario, up to 75% of soft shorelines are expected to be eroding by 2050. Also under a high emission scenario, an estimated £1.2 billion of assets, such as roads, rail or properties, will be at risk from erosion by 2050. This figure drops to £814 million under a low emission scenario. Impacts are expected to occur initially through increased erosion and erosion enhanced flood impact, followed by storm damage and landslips. The report recommends the following actions to reduce some of these impacts. We should improve the quality, extent and frequency of coastal monitoring data. We should recognise the scale of change anticipated at the coast and empower the planning system to secure adequate accommodation space for the coast and its assets to be relocated to risk-free sites where necessary. And we should recognise that maintaining natural coastal defences is a key element in resilience and adaptation strategies. It was this last recommendation which we will be exploring in a little more detail through the Green Growth Accelerator. Our successful Pathfinder bid proposed a combination of research and holistic nature-based solutions to address the challenges posed by climate change and rising sea levels. At the core of our project will be a thorough research programme which will investigate the best natural interventions to reduce flood impacts in coastal areas. The research programme will also seek to plug some gaps in knowledge in respect of the potential blue carbon resource in Highland, as well as the potential for significant carbon sequestration and biodiversity enhancement in the region. In addition to the research programme, we will be investigating the potential of nature-based solutions, including tree planting, peatland restoration, sand dune strengthening, salt marsh restoration, floodplain management, and shellfish habitat management. These nature-based solutions can all have a positive impact on reducing flooding and erosion impacts, but they also each offer further ecosystem services, which is what I'm going to talk about next. I'm going to start with perhaps the two most well-known nature-based solutions, tree planting and peatland restoration. For the purposes of our project, the importance of planting the right tree in the right place will be given careful consideration. In the past, widespread planting of non-native lodgepole pine and Sitka spruce on deep peatland in the Highlands led to damaged peatlands, reduced water quality, increased emissions, and some rather unhealthy and unprofitable tree plantations. Our project will look at areas where planting trees and other vegetation can help to reduce flooding impacts, perhaps by reducing runoff rates from upland areas. By planting mixed native species in appropriate locations, we will also boost local biodiversity and bioabundance, provide areas of recreation, and sequester carbon. Peatlands were long undervalued considering their remarkable ability to sequester and store carbon for hundreds or thousands of years and filter water if left undisturbed. The problem, of course, is that we haven't left very many of our peatlands undisturbed, and, as a result, many of them are currently net emitters of greenhouse gases. This project will restore carefully selected areas of peatland, thus improving their capacity to store carbon and hold water. And while peatlands are not renowned for their biodiversity, peatlands in the Highlands are home to some important assemblages of the UK's rarest birds, such as the red-throated diver and common scoter. Salt marshes and floodplains are perhaps less well-known habitats and receive relatively little attention in nature documentaries and newspaper environment pages. They are, however, vital for managing flood impacts and coastal erosion and, when managed appropriately, can provide opportunities for biodiversity and carbon sequestration. A salt marsh, as seen in the picture on the left, is a coastal ecosystem in the zone between the land and open saltwater that is regularly flooded by the tide. Similarly to peatlands, salt marshes are fragile environments which are frequently negatively impacted by poor management, including agricultural runoff and draining. A floodplain is an area of land next to a river, which regularly is covered in water when the river bursts its banks. These areas are often agricultural land, as nutritious silt is deposited each time the river overflows. Floodplains can offer multiple benefits for local regions, including fish and wildlife protection, flood and erosion control, surface water quality improvements, and recreational opportunities such as fishing and birdwatching. In many areas of Highland, coastal sand dune ridges provide a natural erosion and flood protection role to the land around the dunes. Sand dunes represent a buffer between the sea and the land in many places, albeit a buffer that can shift and change in response to wind and water pressure. In many parts of the world, such as in Portugal, the erosion and flood protection qualities of sand dunes have been enhanced through strengthening. Sand dunes can be strengthened using wooden fences, which offer support and trap sand buildup, or by planting certain grasses and other vegetation to trap and stabilize the sand. Not only does this work reduce flooding and erosion impacts, but the addition of vegetation to sand dunes sequesters carbon and boosts biodiversity. Just off the coastline, seagrasses can help to reduce wave impacts and provide a vital home and food source for marine life. Seagrasses can be damaged by inappropriate fishing and leisure activities, or by changes to water quality. They can be restored by encouraging natural recolonization in areas that have good water quality, or by transplanting vegetation from healthy donor beds or seedlings raised under laboratory conditions. We know relatively little about seagrasses, which, along with their underwater soil sediment, constitute part of our blue carbon resource. The research element of this project could help us to build a clearer picture of what our blue carbon resource is, how it could be nurtured, and what impact it's having in the Highlands. Shellfish beds, including oyster beds and mussel beds, are part of our blue carbon resource as well, and, in addition to being a potential food source for humans, offer a huge range of ecosystem services, including flood mitigation, which they achieve by reducing wave impacts and providing habitat for marine vegetation. Mussels usually live partly buried in soft sediments, but can also attach to rock in shallower coastal waters. Established mussel beds provide a solid foundation for soft corals, tube worms, barnacles, and seaweeds. They also provide shelter for brittle stars, crustaceans, worms, mollusks, and other small animals. Individual mussels can live for up to 50 years if their habitat is undisturbed. However, mussel beds can and have been damaged by bottom trawls and dredges, in particular those used to harvest scallops. The Highlands has several noteworthy horse mussel beds, including the Dornoch Firth and Morwick Moor, Loch Laxford and Knott Head. Native oysters also live on the seabed in shallow coastal waters and estuaries. In their larval stage, they need to attach themselves to shells, stones, or other hard surfaces. These animals live up to 15 years and are filter feeders, taking plankton and other particulate matter from the water around them. The main threats to oysters are overfishing and pests and diseases, such as the parasite Bonomia austraea, and the slipper limpet. This project would help to build our understanding of our blue carbon resource, raise awareness of their valuable ecosystem services, and work to strengthen protective factors vital to the health of these highland populations. This project aims to bring multiple benefits to the Highlands and its communities. The nature-based solutions and research which the Green Growth Accelerator will increase carbon sequestration, thus helping us towards regional net zero targets. It could lead to more training and employment opportunities in green jobs. It could help to reduce the impact of flooding and coastal erosion, and lead to increases in biodiversity and bioabundance. We are still very much in the preparatory stages of this project, and will therefore need to carefully plan for those benefits which we hope to receive. I'm now going to go over the next steps for the project. The scale of the threat posed to the Highlands by climate change, rising seawaters and coastal erosion is indeed large, which is why it's so exciting and timely to be included in the Green Growth Accelerator Pathfinder process. The next steps in the process are to develop our business case and engage with the communities. This is with the assistance of the Scottish Government and the Scottish Futures Trust. We're going to build an experienced and knowledgeable working group to prepare the groundwork for these nature-based solutions I've mentioned today. The success of our project will also rely on our effective engagement with local communities and with landowners. We will therefore begin working closely with these groups to ensure local buy-in and to take advantage of local knowledge and skill sets. Keep your eye on the Highland Council's environment pages next year to follow the development of this programme, or you can reach me via the email you can see on the screen, joe.perry@highland.gov.uk. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend our conference today and for listening to my talk. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks very much. Okay, so we've run over slightly, but we're now moving into our lunch break, during which